Yes, can you
talk back? Is it?
can you turn it down?
Is that all right? Yeah.
That's better.
Give us a...
We come along on Saturday morning, greeting everybody with a smile.
John,
What's that?
Okay, we're on, are we?
All right.
John and Yoko, it is more than wonderful to be able to talk to you after a very, very long time. We've been reminiscing just before the tape started rolling.
Right.
And John, you've been talking about Saturday Club, so the memory is still working.
Oh, the memory is very, very good. It gets better when you get older, actually. It gets more clear.
You remember those glorious
Bernie
days?
Andrews, and I was just saying, I heard some of the tracks. Somebody must have pirated them, Bernie, in America, you know. I've heard Saturday Club. We did a lot of tracks that were never recorded on record for Saturday Club. A lot of stuff we'd been doing at the Cabin or Hamburg and that. So there's some good stuff then. They were well recorded too.
But the interesting thing is that
Three Cool Cats, I think we did.
Did you? You've still got them in your collection?
I think I picked up a pirate record of it. But I'm not sure because I buy all the pirate records and file them away. Don't play them, you know, keep them.
So they're all in mint condition?
Yeah, stuff from Sweden and things like that where there was good live shows done.
Do you think he has an American accent?
No, I don't.
No?
Anything but. In fact, I'm quite surprised that the man sounds very Liverpudlian, if I may say so.
Well, you know, I mean, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
Yoko, let me ask you. We're John and I getting into reminiscing there. How much does all this mean to you? How much have you learnt through your association with John about the days before you met?
Well, part of it's gibberish, and the other part is fascinating, you know. I've learned a lot, haven't I?
Yeah, I've just about told her everything.
In a decade.
A lot of history. We need to refresh people's memories. I would like to refresh people's memories as to how you two actually met in the first place.
Well, it's a long story. Yoko had
Met
come...
with a smash.
Yeah, had come to London, or had been invited to London by some group of artists or something called Destruction in Art Symposium, which was, they had some big thing going on in London. And she had an exhibition put on by that gallery, what was it called?
Indica Gallery.
Indica Gallery, Marion
By
Faithfull's...
John Dunbar.
John Dunbar, Marion Faithfull's ex-husband. And I used to go down there occasionally. I'd been down to see things like Takis, who'd made these flashing lights and sold them for a fortune, you know, bit garbage. But they sent me this pamphlet, or he called me, I don't know which, about this Japanese girl from New York was going to be in a bag, you know, doing this event or happening. I thought, you know, sex. So I went down, and it was quite funny because I had a chauffeur-driven SS Cooper Mini with black windows. You know, the chauffeur was about 8 foot tall, and the Mini drives up, you know. A giant guy gets out and opens the door, and I go in. And it's the night before the opening. And
I was in the basement.
she was in the basement. There was nobody there. I was thinking,
Just in the basement, not in the bag?
No, she wasn't in the bag. So I go in.
I was just preparing, you know, it was before
Right.
the opening. Or something.
There was, you know, like a few nails on a stand and an apple on a stand, cosmic, and just these strange-looking objects, just look like found objects that had been painted white with little messages written on them. So John Dunbar sort of showing me around. I'm looking, thinking, I said, what? How much is that? You know, £100 for a bag of nails? Are you kidding? How much is the apple? £200?
Fresh apple.
Oh, fresh, thanks
Yeah,
a lot.
right.
£200 for a fresh apple? I said, I thought, this is a con. What the hell is this, you know? I go downstairs and there's a few sort of, there must have been assistants, but I thought there were a minimal audience lying around on the floor. Anyway, but Dunbar's trying to hustle a bit because he thinks the millionaire Beatles are coming to buy, you know. So he introduces me to this strange-looking Japanese woman. Nothing's happening in the bags. I'm expecting an orgy, you know. In a bag, you know, something's going to be happening in a bag, you know, psychedelic. And it's all quiet. And he introduces me to her. And I said, well, where's the sort of happening, the event? And she gives me a little card. And it just says, breathe on it. So I said, you mean like that? She says, yeah, that's it. So I'm looking for action, you know, and I see this thing called hammer and nailing. It's a board with a chain and a hammer hanging on it and a bunch of nails at the bottom. I said, well, can I hammer a nail in? She says, no. So John Dunbar whisks her away. I said,
Because it was before the opening, you know. I didn't want anybody to touch anything, you know.
Right.
So he takes her in the corner and says, that's a millionaire, you know who that is? She didn't
No,
know
no,
who I was. You know.
he didn't explain anything,
what
really.
was
He
he-
was just sort of trying to, you know, hint, you know, with his eyes.
Or whatever. She came over and said, you can hammer one in for 5 shillings. I said, I'll give you an imaginary 5 shillings and have an imaginary nail in, all right? And that's when we fell. Da 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 da.
It was as easy as that, was
Well,
it?
but it took a long time before we're both very shy, you know. So the next time we met was a Klaus Oldenburg opening with a lot of, you know, like soft, objects like cheeseburgers made out of rubber and garbage like that. And we met again then and sort of made eye contact. But it was 18 months, 2 years before we really got together.
Do you remember what sort of frame of mind you were in those days, John? Were you a happy man musically? Were you satisfied with life?
What year was it? 66?
66.
Well, you'd have to tell me what
End
the Beatles
of.
had out then, and I'll tell you what mood I was in, because I only remember things by what tracks were out.
It's just that going on record, you'd said at that time, after you'd done, I think I'm right in saying, the film How I Won the War, you've said in the press recently that at that stage you actually genuinely wanted out from the Beatles. The pressure was all too much.
Well, it wasn't so much the
I
pressure, it was
didn't
the
know that.
boredom, you know. After the Beatles' last tour, which was 65, I think, was the one where the Ku Klux Klan were burning Beatle records, and I was, you know, held up as a Satanist or something. Then we decided no more touring, that's enough of that. I'm not going to put up with it. And I was dead nervous, so I said yes to Dick Lester, that I would make this movie with him. I went to Almeria, Spain for 6 weeks, because I didn't know what to do. You know, what do you do when you don't tour? There's no life. Because I've been on the road for...
And that meant a lot to you, didn't it?
Well, it wasn't that I wanted to tour so much, but I didn't know what to do. What the hell do you do all day, you know? I mean, so I did the movie, which was boring as hell, and 6 weeks there. But I was really too scared to walk away. I was thinking, well, this is like the end, really. You know, there's no more touring. That means there's going to be a blank space in the future at some time or other. That's when I really started considering, what can one do? Considering the life without the Beatles, what would it be? And I spent that 6 weeks thinking about that. What am I going to do? You know, am I going to be doing Vegas? I call it now, but cabaret. I mean, where do you go? You know. So that's when I started thinking about it. But I could not think what it would be, or how I could do it, or I didn't consider forming my own group or anything, because it didn't even enter my mind. Just what would I do when it stopped?
But at some stage you obviously did consider that the two of you would make music together. Did that happen quickly?
Well, yes, as soon as we got into Two Virgins, I was interested.
And this is going back to 1968, of course.
But
for
that
the first
just
time
happened. Two Virgins
Yeah,
just
Two Virgins happened by
Mm.
accident, yeah. But still, once I realised somebody else was as kind of balmy as me, you know, liked the sort of freaky sounds and could equally enjoy non-dance music or non-pop music that was, they call it avant-garde, but whatever it is, you know, things to hear in an earphone.
Did you feel it was avant-garde at the time? I mean, we're going back now, what, 1968, 12 years. Did you see that as being...
Two Virgins?
Being very, very avant-garde?
Well, that's the only word you can use for it, but, you know, I think a label like avant-garde defeats itself. You know, they have avant-garde exhibition. The very fact that avant-garde can have an exhibition defeats the purpose of avant-garde, because it's already formalised and ritualised, so it's not avant-garde. But that was the only word that was the word that was applied to her and her ilk.
Sort of loosely.
But I didn't think of it anything other than, you know, variations on a theme of sound.
1969, in April, the Beatles, of course, had a smash hit back home in the UK with Get Back. What was your sort of frame of mind as far as the Beatles still having hits was concerned, when you'd already started on what was to be a very different musical relationship? Did
Well,
it matter to you?
I wasn't consciously making any decisions. It was all sort of subconscious. And I just made the records with the Beatles like one goes to one's job at 9 in the morning, you know. I mean, Paul or whoever would say it's time to make a record. I'd just go in and make a record, you know, and not think too much about it. Always sort of enjoy the session if it was a good session. You know, if we got our rocks off playing, it was fine. If it was a drag, it was a drag. But it had become a job.
Now, in 1969 also, in April, you did Rape, which was a TV documentary in Vienna.
It was filmed in London for Vienna, Austrian TV.
Right, for Austrian TV. How did that come about?
Well, you want me to answer or she
No,
should
Yoko.
answer? Yeah, you
Yoko.
answer. It's your film.
Well, it was just a filmic idea about just following a girl and keep following and just filming her, and what would happen to somebody who's totally exposed all the time, you know. And Well, in a way, I mean, I didn't think about it then, but because that filmic idea was something that I thought before I really got together with John. So, but it was very interesting that in a way the Beatles were in that position, and John obviously was in that position of constantly being followed by camera, you know.
Mm.
But we did it with this girl that sort of. We picked a girl. Well, we didn't pick a girl. The cameraman picked a girl. Anyway, and he just kept on following the girl, and the girl keeps saying, "Well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" You know. And finally, somehow they made an arrangement, so they got a key for the girl's apartment.
From her sister.
Oh, is that what it is? So, and she didn't know about this, and she went into her apartment, and of course, these guys are still filming her, you know.
Yeah.
So she freaked out, and it's just a beautiful scene where she's saying, why is this happening to me? And she's sort of just hiding her face and everything, you know.
She was a tourist in London, and she was picked out of the blue. We used to send the cameraman out every day for test shooting in the park, in Hyde Park, and he'd pick somebody, and we'd look at the rushes of different people he'd started following round. And they finally, we selected this girl and said, okay, go back, you know, because he knew which house she'd come out of. And she was Austrian or something.
Beautiful girl, beautiful.
Beautiful girl, claimed to be an actress after the film came out.
I'm sure she did.
Right. But, and also we were accused of setting it up that she knew all about it, but she didn't at all know about it.
A newfound career for somebody who'd never dreamt it had happened to them.
But talking of bags, what we did was we went to the famous hotel in Vienna to put it on the TV there. It caused a riot. It was the biggest reaction the Austrian TV had ever had. I mean, there was complaints. There's no sex in it. It was just a constant... You think something's going to happen all the time, but nothing ever really happens. Just the pressure on the girl that she's cracking up under the strain of these strange people following around.
Yeah.
And but the Austrians never saw us. We were, what's that hotel? The Chocolate Cake Hotel. It used to be the Habsburgs Castle or whatever. And we're in there, but they never saw us, the Austrian press. We did everything in a bag. So we came down to the press conference in a bag, in the elevator. And the front page of the Austrian papers was all these people holding mics to a bag, you know. And all they said was, "But John, is that really you?" I said, "Yeah, it's me." "Well, how do we know?" I said, "Because I'm telling you." They said, "Oh, will you sing a song?" You know, I sang Maggie May and she sang some Japanese folk song or something to them in a bag. And a guy said, But I've waited years to see you. Why did you have to pick Austria to go in a bag?" I said, "Because we wanted to, you know."
You did want to, but looking back on it now, how do you feel about that sort of thing now? Because it got amazing reaction, didn't it, from some people in those
Oh, but
days.
it was great.
You're smiling and giggling about it
We
now.
love it.
Do you think you'd have smiled and giggled about it then?
We
Did
were.
you?
Are you kidding? You want to see what we were doing in the bag? We were cracking up in there like that. On some of the bag events, one of them were our Rolls Royce. We didn't go to some Royal Command opening of a movie or something. We sent 2 Hare Krishna kids in the bag, and it was in all the English papers, John and Yoko arriving. But for some reason or other, the chauffeur,
By mistake,
arrived after Princess Margaret. So the thing in the English papers was, how dared they insult the Queen or the Princess Margaret by having the car arrive late? Well, we didn't plan that at all. And we said, well, if anybody asks you any questions, just keep singing Hare Krishna, because they'll think it's John and Yoko anyway. They're that daft enough to sing Hare Krishna. It must be John and Yoko. We watched it on TV, you know, we were peeing in our pants.
Let's move to June 1969, and the ballad of John and Yoko went to number 1 in Britain and was top 10 in this country. Did that give you a feeling of satisfaction and of achievement as a duo, that you got a great success with what has since become...
We never thought of it.
I never thought about it. No, I didn't even remember it was number 1. No, it was just we were in Paris.
We were so busy doing things.
We were, you know, I mean, that period we were doing films, records together with the Beatles, bed-ins, and it was just...
But did you want to detach yourselves as 2 people? I mean, you mentioned that you were still
John and Yoko was Paul and I made that record.
Right.
He played bass and drums, and I played guitar and sang. You know?
And in the back of your mind, was there a feeling that John and Yoko by this time definitely wanted to go their own way and create their own
music? No, we didn't think of it like that. It wasn't definite like that. We were just so busy and involved with things that we were doing, and we got so inspired every minute, you know. And so maybe it just sort of took a natural course. Don't you think?
You know, she would just sort of be around, and we'd make... had the Beatles been less tense about it, there probably would have been some. There was a couple of jam sessions in Let It Be with Yoko and the Beatles playing, but they never got in the movie, of course. But I understand it all now. But then we said, well, why isn't? She just wanted to join in everything,
jam,
just join in whatever was going on. So we had no conscious thing about, well, we're here and they're there. We were just making music.
You say they were tense, John. Was that because they feared an intervention, or because they feared that the two of you would eventually go your own ways, and that would be it?
I don't know whether they were conscious. I think looking back, understand there'd been 4 guys very close together, and the women that we were with then, wives or girlfriends, had been, the old-fashioned type of female that we all know and love. The one that was in the kitchen all the time with the baby, and you never. She never came to the sessions even. You never saw the wives, only for openings when they did their hair, And suddenly we were together all the time, sort of in a corner mumbling and giggling together and doing 2 virgins and bags. And Paul George and I think, what the hell are they doing? What's happened to him? And my attention completely went off them. Now, it wasn't deliberate. It was just like so involved and intrigued with what we were doing and then we'd look around and see that we weren't being approved. But I understand how they felt, because if it had been Paul or Georgia Ringer that had fallen in love with somebody, got totally involved suddenly, it wasn't like, George coming in and saying, I'm going to work with Eric Clapton in a band now and screw you. It wasn't that kind of thing at all. It was just suddenly this involvement.
It wasn't in our consciousness at all. Yeah. And I was just amazed because, I didn't know anything about England, really, and I was always in New York, so to speak. And to me, he was just another Englishman. I didn't know about the Liverpool and that, all that sort of thing.
Just another Englishman, my dear.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. And just sort of, he looked sort of, the first impression I got from him was he's sort of handsome and, sort of nice and tender, I thought. But anyway, so I didn't know about all these macho trip, that they were on. It was a real surprise.
It's an interesting way of putting it. It really is a macho trip.
Well, yes, I know what you mean. I mean, Beatle music is not a macho trip, and that's true. And he did look very nice and sort of with the feminine side of the society was represented by them in a way. There was that too. So I didn't realize that. I mean, they didn't come on like a box or anything,
We'll talk more about the feminine side of society, I think, a little bit later on. If we move to May 1969...
You mean Benny Hill?
You have got a good memory. He's on over here,
No, he's on over here all the time. Tommy
here.
Cooper. There's so many English programs on in New York especially that you see everything.
Now you've brought the subject up, and before we go any further and move to the unfinished music number 2, let me just ask you...
Life with the Lions.
That's right.
B.B. Daniels and Ben.
Oh, now we're back with the BBC programmes again, aren't we? It still obviously means a lot to you. You've got a memory for all the names. As you sit here in New York on this day, watching English television programmes, do you ever get the itch to think, it'd be nice to go back and have a look?
Oh, yeah, but as I always say to any Englishman I meet, most English people I meet are expatriates, I mean, as I was saying off stage before, I've been to Singapore, Hong Kong, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and all points east and Caribbean and Pacific places where, Noel Coward and Somerset Maugham and all those people that I like to read about were, and the famous place in Singapore, the Hotel Rattles or Ruffles or something, where they'd all be.
Raffles, yes.
So as Churchill said, it's the Englishman's inalienable right to live where the hell he likes. So, and as I say to an Englishman, say, well, don't you get homesick and come back? I said, what do you think? It's going to vanish? It's not going to be there when I want to go back?
But he's very English at heart, And I mean, just this morning, he was just looking at this book and selling. It was just this coincidence because, we're meeting you now and, this all very English thing. And he saw this Liverpool in this book and he started choking up, really. Oh, Liverpool.
I'm supposed to be tough,
Yeah, I know what you mean. The combination is very peculiar,
But
the macho side and the other side.
It's a traditional English thing from Drake or whatever on to go everywhere, But I do find myself in English parts of the world, and it's very interesting.
Do you have many English friends in New York at the moment, John?
Well, as the Moonlight on the Water song says, no friends and yet no enemies. I'm either working or family-oriented. I don't do a lot of socializing with people of any nationality, and offhand I can't think of anybody English or American, that I particularly hang around with. We've been self-involved since we met, and we're totally self-contained.
Self-contained.
I mean, when
Right.
Elton or Bowie or Mick are around and we're in the mood to mix, we see them. Oh, they're English, right? I forget. You see, I don't always divide people into nationality. You know, I mean, it's just Bowie's in town now doing Elephant Man.
Yeah, we saw it last night.
I haven't seen it, but you know,
Oh.
I would consider him a friend or acquaintance. I don't know how close you'd put it, because I've worked with him and we both know him, and so in that respect, whoever the rockers that come through, I see them.
So if we go back to May '69 and we talk
Yeah.
about Life with the Lions, Yoko, you were in bed on the cover, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, we had a miscarriage or something, did we?
Well, you had a miscarriage,
Yes.
and I was there. The
Right,
actual
exactly.
reality of it.
Yes, you'd had great problems, hadn't you, conceiving?
I know. We had many miscarriages.
We
didn't
did.
Yes, about 3 maybe.
Yeah, enough to make us miserable about it. You know, think we could never have a child, but we did. It turned out to an English doctor told me something wrong with my sperm. You know, because of the hard
Do we
life
have
I'd
to go
led,
into that?
and he said I could never have a baby. That we could never have a baby because of me. But we met this Chinese acupuncturist in San Francisco. He said, "I thought you worry. You have baby. You just be good boy. Eat well. No drugs. No drink." And
Really?
that's what I did, and we had a baby.
And Sean is living proof.
He is, yeah.
He is. Right.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah.
Briefly dealing with that album, one
Yeah.
side was called Cambridge '69.
Ah,
That interests me. Why Cambridge '69?
Oh, that was funny because that was around the time that. Why was it 69
oh,
though?
okay. I know the story
anyway,
backwards, but you can
I was
tell it.
invited. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. You go ahead.
No, it was your story.
I was invited to Cambridge to do a number, you know, sort of
This is
avant-garde
independent
number.
of me, though. There's nothing to do with
And
me.
they didn't realize that we were together, so to speak.
This was to do with the university, I will.
Yeah,
I
This
will
Cambridge
was
presume.
University.
just
yeah.
before we got married, I suppose, you know, whatever. So they didn't realize that, and they invited me, and so I said, well, all right, what shall I do? And John was saying, well, it's all right, why don't you go? And they're saying, well, are you going to bring a band or what, you know? So John said, well, I'm the band, but don't tell them, you know. I'll be the band, you know. So I said, yes, I'll bring a band, you know, band with
When
me.
we arrived in Cambridge, and it was supposed to be a avant-garde, that word again, jazz thing, right? And there was a guy called John Chakai, who was apparently a famous avant-garde sax guy, or jazz sax guy. I didn't know any of them. And a few people that I don't remember the names of, they were there too. And I turned up as her band, you know. And the people were looking at it, is it, you know. I just had a guitar and an amp, and that was the first time I played that style, just pure feedback and whatever it is on that track. And the audience were very weird, because they were all these sort of intellectual artsy-fartsies from Cambridge, you know. And they were uptight because the rock and roll guy was there, even though I wasn't doing any rhythm. If you hear it, it's just pure sound.
Yeah.
Because what else can you do when a woman's howling? You know, you just go along with it, right?
They were totally silent.
They
you
were
know,
totally
very
silent.
polite.
Well, the reaction I got from the quotes-unquote avant-garde group, not only in Cambridge, it was the same reaction that she got from the rock and roll people, like, what's she doing here?
Yes.
Or when I was doing the stuff with her, this little tight-knit avant-garde scene would be saying, who the hell is he? He's one of those pop. So we were both getting
think they
slack for not
noticed?
being in the right bag.
Do you think they noticed that it was you? Because, I mean, they
You
were sort
bet
of-
they noticed me. They were trying so hard not to notice. You know that
Oh,
when you
is
go in
that
a
what they-
restaurant, you can always tell people are trying not to look at you. You know, they're being cool, and you pick up this sort of vibes or whatever you call it coming from people not looking at you. You know, it's worse than when they look.
So that was Cambridge 1969.
That's Cambridge 1969.
A visit to the university.
Right.
Back in '69, July the 4th, the Plastic Ono Band single Give Peace a Chance, which was number 2 in Britain, and I think it's still regarded by a great number of people as being a bit of a classic.
great.
Refresh our memories as to why you put that particular song together, because you've fought for a lot of causes, haven't you, the both of you, over the years?
Yeah, well, after we first did the bed-in Amsterdam, and the initial reaction to the bed-in was there. Now, after the point of the bed-in a nutshell was a commercial for peace as opposed to a commercial for war, which was on the news every day those days, and the newspapers every day it was dismembered bodies and napalm, and we thought, well, why don't they have something nice in the newspapers, that old thing, you know? And anyway, we did the bed-in. What the bed-in was 7 days, because the press were always asking questions. 7 days of they can ask anything, no secrets, you know. No time limit, like, you know, you come in and take the photographs, then the photographers go away, and then the press are allowed 10 minutes to ask. This was, you come in as long as you like, till you've got everything you need to know about John and Yoko, or what we stand for, or what we are.
Which, knowing the press as I vaguely do, must have dumbfounded them, actually, as an offer.
Well, I tell you, one of the most hysterical moments was the first day when Don Short and all the gang and Donald Zeck and all them, they were fighting like crazy. We were sitting in the Amsterdam Hilton in the bed like two little kids, with all the posters on the wall.
Flower children.
Flower kids or whatever. These guys were sweating to fight to get in first because they thought we were going to be making love in bed, you see. That's where their minds were at. Because we'd be naked, bed,
right.
John and Yoko, sex. So anyway, I'll try and cut this story down because all of them go on forever. There's so many links to it. We did it again. We tried to do it in New York, but the American government wouldn't let us in. They knew we'd done it in Amsterdam, and they didn't want any peaceniks here, which is what we heard the department of whoever controls that said. But we ended up doing it in Montreal instead and broadcasting across the border. You see, and there was live riots at Berkeley at the Bed Inn in Amsterdam. But after answering all these questions many times, it got down to all we were saying was give peace a chance. Not we have any formula or communism or socialism will answer it or any ism could answer it. We didn't have a format or we couldn't give you a plan.
But just sit down
just consider
and
the
think
idea
about it.
of not having this war. Just consider it. So that's what in a nutshell, we were saying. So we recorded it in the bedroom of the Montreal Hilton or whatever hotel we were in.
On an 8-track machine, which you had brought up to the room, I gather.
Up to the room, yeah. And there was like Tommy Smothers and Tim Leary and Dick Gregory and all people sort of clapping along and singing on the chorus. And if you hear the record, it's funny actually because my rhythm sense has always been a bit wild. And halfway through it, I got on the on-beat instead of the backbeat. And it was hard because there was non-musicians playing along with us. And so I had to put a lot of tape echo to double up the beat to keep a steady beat right through the whole record. So it goes boom, 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 instead of bap, bap, bap.
It's the thought that counts.
It was a thought. And I sort of cheated. The word masturbation was in it, but I wrote in the lyric sheet because I'd had enough with the bannings of every bloody record I put out was banned for some reason or other. Even Walrus was banned on the BBC at one time because it said knickers, right? So, I mean, I'd been banned so many times all over that I copped out and wrote mastication.
Yeah.
No, well, it's not a cop-out. It was a consideration because it's a song that has to go around the world, Yeah,
and
it
was more important to get it out
message,
than be bothered by a word masturbation.
And probably the first time and the last time at the hotel in Montreal had been asked for an 8-track recording machine on room service.
Yeah, right.
Peace in Toronto, a live album where you teamed up with Eric Clapton, Klaus Voormann and Alan White. Now, Klaus, I remember, was with Manfred Mann's band.
Right.
So he was an old mate. What about...
And he was from Hamburg.
That's right, from the days that...
We met him in Hamburg. He was an illustrator for record covers in Germany.
This goes back to sort of the Barry Fantoni era, doesn't it?
1961,
right.
When we met Klaus Voormann. 1962, maybe.
And Eric? What was the tie-up with Eric? Because I remember Eric with the Yardbirds and...
Well, Eric had been a friend of George's. The guitarists all tend to hang out together.
The lead men.
Yeah. And we were in that exuberant period, and we got this phone call from Toronto on a Friday night that there was a rock and roll revival show in Toronto with 100,000 audience or whatever it was, and that Chuck was going to be there and Jerry Lee was going to be there and all the great rockers who were still living, and Bo Diddley, and supposedly the Doors were top of the bill.
The Friday night thing, I'm not sure.
Well,
remember Wust? They came to Wust to discuss it and all that as
whatever. Whatever.
Yeah, right.
It was very, very quick. We didn't have a band then. We didn't even have a group that had played with us for more than half a minute.
But I bet you didn't have too much trouble getting people to come and play.
Called Eric. It was I couldn't find him. I don't know where the hell he was, but finally got through to him. I got Klaus, and we got Alan White because we'd cut Instant Calm around that period, so I'd met him, he'd been on that. And I said, look, there's this thing on in Toronto. You want to come? They said, okay. Now, we didn't know what to play because we'd never played together before, the band. And on the airplane, we're running through these oldies. So the rehearsal for that record, which turned into not a bad record, was on the plane with electric guitars. So not even acoustic, we couldn't hear, saying, are we doing the Elvis version of Blue Suede Shoes or the Carl Perkins, with the different break at the beginning, jing jing instead of jet whatever. And that's what we did. We just wrote this list. I hadn't got the words to any of the songs. I knew Dizzy Miss Lizzy, but there's a couple by Blue Suede Shoes and a couple I hadn't done since Liverpool in the Cavern. And that's all we could do. And we went on. We were so nervous because we didn't know we were doing. And she was going to do her pieces, Don't Worry Kyoko, you know, which lasted 30 minutes. And we went on. It was fantastic. It was just getting dark. The lights were just going down. This is the first time I ever heard about this. I'd never seen it anywhere. I think it was the first time it happened. They all lit candles or lights, and the sun was just going down. There was over 50
gorgeous.
or 60,000.
I remember the reports, yeah.
And all these candles lit up, and it was really beautiful, you know. And we were sort of the vibes were fantastic, and we did the string of rock and roll stuff. Then we finished with Yoko's one, because you can't go anywhere after you've reached that sort of pitch.
Yeah.
And to end the show, I just said, look, at the end, when she's finished doing whatever she's doing, just lean your guitars on the amps and let it keep howling, and we can get off like that, because you can't very well go jijing like the Beatles and bow at the end of screaming and 50 watts of feedback.
Exit on feedback.
And we tried to put it out on Capitol, and Capitol didn't want to put it out. They said, this is garbage, we're not going to put it out with her screaming on one side, you doing this sort of live stuff. And they just refused to put it out. But we finally persuaded them that, you know, people might buy this. Of course, it went gold the next day. And then the funny thing was, this is a side story, Klein had got a deal on that record that it was a John and Yoko Plastic Ono record, not a Beatles record, so we could get a higher royalty, because the Beatles royalties were so low, they'd been locked in '63. And Capitol said, sure, you can have it. You know, nobody's going to buy that crap.
Just a throwing, yeah.
They just threw it away and gave it us. And it came out, and it was fairly successful, and it went gold. I don't know what chart position, but I've got a gold record somewhere that says... And 4 years later, we go to collect the royalties, and you know what they say? This is a Beatle record.
Oh, really?
So Capitol EMI file that under Beatle record. Isn't it incredible?
It is. And you included on it Year Blues from the White Album.
Yeah, blues, yeah, because I think I'd worked Year Blues with Eric on the Rock and Roll Circus show of Mick, the Rolling Stones show. John and Yoko appeared on that show too.
A film of it, yeah.
There's a film of it, but of course Mick never put it out because whatever. And there was me, Eric Clapton, Keith Richard on bass, I can't remember the drummer, and I did Year Blues, and then Yoko came on and did her blues, you know. And there was some crazy violinist. So Eric knew that number, so two of us knew that number. We all knew Blue Suede Shoes. And so we just sort of picked the numbers like that. Offhand, I don't recall what other songs are on it.
You're smiling while you're telling me. It sounds as though in those days you were enjoying the freedom to be able to do something like that, which was instantly creative.
It was instantly creative, and there was no big palaver, you know. It wasn't like this set format show that I'd been doing with the Beatles where you go on and do these same numbers, I Want to Hold Your Head, you know, and the show lasts 20 minutes, you know, and nobody's listening, and they're just screaming, and the amps are as big as a peanut. And, you know, it was more of a spectacular rather than rock and roll. Whereas actually the first time I performed without the Beatles for years was the Rock and Roll Circus. And it was great to be on stage with Eric and Keith Richard and a different noise coming out behind me, even though I was still singing and playing the same style. It was just great experience. I thought, wow, it's fun with other people, you know.
Romping through a career with John and Yoko, November 1969, the wedding album. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, yes. With a wedding certificate and... Was it a piece of cake included in the box?
So a photograph, John Kosh, the photographer, took the photograph of a piece of cake. It was like our sharing our wedding with whoever wanted to share it with us. We didn't expect a hit record out of it. It was more of that's why we call it wedding album. You know, people make a wedding album and show it to the relatives when they come round. Well, our relatives are what you call fans or people that follow us outside. So that was our way of letting them join in on the wedding. And I think you sang No Bed for Beetle John then?
Yes, I think so.
Or was that on Life of the Lions?
I don't remember.
No bed for Beetle John. She was singing newspaper clippings.
November 69.
And we was part of Amsterdam, bedding. Some of the interviews and talk
it was
that went
peace
on.
and love, symbolic of, you know, wedding and all
And we
that.
got married in Gibraltar.
That's
The
right.
Rock.
The Rock.
The British Rock.
Any particular reason for getting married in Gibraltar?
We couldn't. We wanted to get married on the cross-channel ferry. That was the romantic part. When we went to Southampton, and then we couldn't get on because she wasn't English and she couldn't get that day visa to go across. And they said, anyway, you can't get married. The captain's not allowed to do it anymore. So we were in Paris, and we were calling Peter Brown, who's now with Robert Stigwood, RSO. But we called him and said, we want to get married. Where can we go? And he called back and said, Gibraltar's the only place. So okay, let's go. And we went there. And it was beautiful. It's the
nice.
Pillar of Hercules, and also symbolically they called it the end of the world at one period. There's some name besides Pillar of Hercules, that they thought the world outside was a mystery from there. So that was like the gateway to the world. So we liked it in the symbolic sense, and the rock foundation of our relationship.
November 69, Cold Turkey, which was top 20 in the UK, and got to number 30 in America, I think.
Yeah, it was banned here as well. You know, they thought it was a pro-drug song. You know, it was just a.
What was it to you, John? Was it?
It was
something that was very important.
Yeah, because as always, I've always expressed what I've been feeling or thinking at the time, however badly or not. You know, from early Beatle records on, it became more conscious later. But so I was just writing the experience I'd had of withdrawing from heroin and saying, you know, this is what I thought when I was withdrawing, you know.
But also musically, it was very interesting. I mean,
yeah, Eric Clapton was on that too.
Yes, and also we did attempt a few musically advanced, interesting things in it.
Yeah, Mark Bolan said it was the only new thing that had happened since the original Beatles when it came out. But I wasn't thinking I'm going to make a new sound. But it was pretty, what they call minimal now, just bass, drums, and guitar.
But it was banned in America.
It was banned because it referred to drugs. And instead of using it as an example of, you know, look, this guy is saying this is... It was like, to me, it was a rock and roll version of the Man with the Golden Arm. You know, it's like banning the Man with the Golden Arm because it showed Frank Sinatra suffering from drug withdrawal. To ban the record is the same thing. It's like banning the movie because it shows reality.
Does it amuse you that people's attitudes have changed over the years? Perhaps amuse is totally the wrong word. What are your feelings? I mean, drugs were something that we all live with, I think, in our business back in the 60s. In the 70s, the subject seemed to go underground because it was accepted by society, which to me is always a strange irony.
Yeah.
That people suddenly say, well, OK, maybe it isn't so bad. How do you both look at it now as people that were involved in it, for want of a better phrase, and in your case, were honest enough to come out and put something down on musically on the subject?
Well, I don't think about it that much.
Well, it's just like it's a trip that we went through. But at the same time now, it's cleanup time, and we're really sort of like cleaning our bodies, and it's very important that.
I don't think it's just strange when you hear people are snorting in the White House and that stuff. You know, after the misery they put a lot of people through, and like they bust us in England, and we were planted, and I have now a stain on my. I have a record for life because the cop who bust me and Yoko and also bust Brian Jones and the Stones, and he was scalp hunting and making a name for himself and illegally taking money from Indian immigrants, and you know, a real corrupt scene. The whole of the drug squad in London was corrupt, run by this guy Pilcher, who's now in jail. He ran away to Australia. It's all right for him. He's paying the price of the real criminal act. And I have a record for life. I have problems getting in countries because this guy bust me. I've never denied having been involved with drugs, but at that particular time, those cops put it in our house. There was a question raised in the House of Parliament: why do they need 40 cops to arrest John and Yoko? I mean, that thing was set up. The Daily Mail and the Daily Express were there before the cops came. He'd called the press. In fact, Don Short had told us they're coming to get you 3 weeks before. So believe me, I'd cleaned the house out because Jimi Hendrix had lived there before in this apartment, and I'm not stupid. I went through the whole damn house.
And it caused you a lot of heartache.
It caused me a lot of heartache, and it still does. So I want to know any legal minds listening. How do I get rid of a record? Because the statute of appeals ran out because I don't have a legal mind, and I went to find out about it at one time because I wanted to get this thing off my record. And they told me, oh, you should have applied within the first 2 years. Well, nobody told me that. And the only reason I pleaded guilty because I thought they'd send Yoko away because we weren't married. And I thought, what's the word? They'd throw her out of the country. So I copped a plea. And the cop said to me, well, we've got you now, so it's nothing personal. You know. So he's in jail, I've got a record, and I have problems all around the world because of that record.
Was that arrest after Cold Turkey?
Probably.
I think it probably was.
Because you see, I was just thinking.
Well, Life of the Lions, the picture on the back of Life of the Lions, Unfinished Music #2, is us being dragged out of the police station. It's from a newspaper picture.
And they say that a blind man has an honest face because he doesn't know how to control the muscles and to express himself with using the muscles on their faces, sort of try to make a fictitious expression or something. They can't do that because they don't see their face. And it's almost like that an artist is, that if you get truly inspired and something comes through you, like songs or poetry or whatever, then it's part of your experience, So the things, you can't lie, In your work somehow, you can't lie, And so we were just sort of always bringing out songs that reflects our life. And like Cold Turkey, was something that reflected our life, And that's the kind of thing that always brings us trouble, doesn't it? I mean,
Honesty is not always the best policy.
Seems like it, but still, I prefer it. Because it's harder to live with the phony than it is to live with the real, even though the real sort of causes harassments in a physical sense or an outside sense. I found that the other way causes internal problems. Being conning yourself or fooling yourself, which is quite easy for all of us. We're all so good at it, that you don't even realise you're doing it. But in the way you pay a different kind of price for that. It's like the Oscar Wilde thing, with the face going old upstairs on the portrait, and that one. It's that one.
So from around Cold Turkey, we started to really pay our dues in a way, for being honest.
Yes, it was about 7 and 6, wasn't it? 3p they call it now, I don't even know how to count English money.
Really?
And I hardly know what American money is in change. I know that one is a 25 cent. I haven't learned all those little nickels and those ones. So if I went back to England, I wouldn't know how to buy anything or pay for anything. I have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh,
It was 12 and 6 when I left.
Yes, I could talk to you for hours about decimalisation, but I better hadn't. I think we were all pretty well conned there. A lot of us think that.
Right.
Just before Christmas 1969, you did a concert at the Lyceum in the Strand in London with the Plastic Ono Band, including George Harrison, Billy Preston, one of my favourites, and the late lamented Keith Moon, God bless him.
Yeah,
what a
and
wonderful
Bonnie
character.
and Delaney's whole band.
That's right.
We were talking about that yesterday, funnily enough.
Oh, yes.
It was a
that's
UNICEF
right.
concert.
It's amazing that it's recorded.
Oh,
I mean,
great
like they
that somebody
remember
remembers
it. I know.
Because we were doing the show, and George and Bonnie and Delaney and all that, Billy and all that crowd turned up. They'd just come back from Sweden, and George had been playing Invisible Man in Bonnie and Delaney's band, which Eric Clapton had been doing, to get the pressure of being the famous Eric and the famous George. They became the guitarists in this, and they all turned up, and it was again like the concert in Toronto. I said, will you come on? They said, well, what are you going to play? I said, listen, we're going to do probably blues or whatever was current. Cold Turkey, which was 3 chords, and Eric knew that, and Don't Worry Kyoko, which was Yoko's, which was 3 chords, a riff. And I said, once we get onto Yoko's riff, just keep hitting it. And it was a fantastic show. I don't think it was recorded. It was fantastic, very heavy.
I thought it was.
It was?
It came out 3 years later on, sometime in New York
I
City.
know,
did
that
it
was
not?
Oh,
one
I'm
of the
sorry,
reasons
my mind is not that
sometime in
clever.
New York City was not that popular because it was such a heavy
That was a
piece,
heavy show, and a lot of the audience walked out, but the ones that stayed, they were in a trance, man. They just all came to the front because it was one of the first real heavy rock shows where we had a good backing that John and Yoko did together. And I always think of some of those kids, they were very young. It was a UNICEF concert show or something. Or some of those kids formed those freaky bands later because there was about 200 kids at the front there, some about 13, 14, 15, who were looking at Yoko and looking at us the way we were playing that Don't Worry Kyoko. And it really reached the peak of whatever you call it. It really went out there that night. And I often think, I wonder if... I hear touches of our early stuff in a lot of the punk new wave stuff. I hear licks and flicks coming out. And it pleases me, and pleases both of us. I think, I'd love to know, were they in the audience? And did somebody go and form a group in London? Because it sure as hell sounds like it.
It's an interesting thought. Eric Clapton was billed as Derek Clapto, I think. This was sort of around the era when people had contractual problems, I would imagine.
Yeah, the record companies always want to possess your mind, body and soul. The record contracts always used to say anything you say they own too, so all those BBC tapes that we did, officially EMI think they own them on a bit of paper, right? Every interview, everything.
Right. December 1970, the Plastic Ono Band album, which really did get some pretty good reviews, didn't it? And I think People.
Yes. The mother. We did a twin one. Yoko did one, I did one. In fact, you know what we were doing last night?
What were you
We
doing?
were playing Yoko's Plastic Ono Band album. The first track is called Why. And it was the first real rock and roll take we ever did together. And it's Ringo, Klaus, me on guitar, and Yoko on voice. And the fascinating thing is, even we didn't know where Yoko's voice started and where my guitar ended on the intro. But you can tell. And we were playing it last night for the Jack Douglas.
You know, it's something very strange because, you know, John being what he is in a way, you know, somehow he just goes all the way. So his guitar playing in avant-garde was quite avant-garde, really, you know. And we both suffered because people didn't appreciate what we were doing. But in fact, John suffered as an avant-garde guitarist because he was saying, you know, well, I wish somebody would notice what I did, you know. And when you go back to, if anybody's interested, go back to Plastic Ono, Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band, you know, that album.
Yeah.
I mean, his guitar playing,
Thank you,
somebody
Mother.
should notice it because it's just fantastic
They
stuff.
will. We'll reissue them.
Produced John, Yoko and Phil Spector, if we stick on that for just a
Yeah,
moment.
sure.
And it was the first official solo LP.
Yes.
So
yeah.
you were what you were at long last, and there were no strings attached, so to speak.
Yes, it was nice to do it, you know, and it was minimal again, meaning there was no overdubbing, just my guitar, a bass and drums, or my piano, a bass and drums. And if you remember, at the beginning of Mother, the beginning of the album has this bell going dong, dong, dong. It's a church bell which I slowed down to 33, so it's really like a horror movie. And that was like the death knell of the mother-father Freudian trip. And if you listen to the beginning of Double Fantasy, you hear ding, ding,
I was just thinking.
ding, which is actually a bell that Yoko calls her wishing bell. You know, she rings the bell and makes a wish or whatever, which she can explain herself on that level. And I put it on the Double Fantasy as to show the lightness and the difference of the long, long trip from Mother to starting over.
We'll be coming to that later. Rolling Stone gave it a 5-star rating, that album, I seem to remember.
Oh,
And
they
a-
did?
And a critic said, like all
Not
seminal
bad.
rock, it's timeless in its concept. That's the sort of quote you appreciate.
Well, it's better than shithead. Oh. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know
Can
what
you
you can
say
say
that these
anymore in
days?
England. I hear all this. You can say anything on TV in England and radio. I'm not sure. But also it was reviewed as simplistic and self-indulgent.
No, I don't think so. Not
There was. I
simplistic,
never
really?
forget a nasty word,
all
my
right,
dear.
all right.
Now, self-indulgent means you talk about yourself, you know. So as
What
I was
else can we
again,
talk
I was
about,
talking
yeah?
about this last night. I was saying because somebody said our film Imagine was self-indulgent, and then there was a remark that simplistic and self-indulgent to do with Double Fantasy. Now I was explaining to somebody. I said if we'd have used pseudonyms and called it Tommy, the rock opera, or created Ziggy Stardust and Sadie Lutz, and sang exactly the same lyrics as a third persona, then it's more acceptable to certain minds, you see. But because we don't put a persona on, I call it lipstick and clown makeup. We don't put a persona on, but we act. If you could you can compare it with method acting, say when Marlon Brando or that ilk of actor acts, they're themselves, but they're not themselves. Whereas when Olivier acts, he becomes somebody else. Either one, I would not rate as, you know, this guy is better than that, or this person is better than that. But Marlon Brando could be called self-indulgent, and Olivier could be called not self-indulgent. To me, it's equal. We just prefer to not wear makeup and
I see what you're
use
driving at.
ourselves. But still there is a distance between what the records of the songs are saying and our real selves in our own privacy.
Well, this is society. It's a very perverted society where
Oh, good.
directness, you know, is supposed to be something to be ashamed of. You know, so being directly yourself is something almost obscene. You know, I mean, you have to somehow pretend that you are something other than yourself. You know, and that's not very
Interesting.
interesting. So, well, I mean, we're people. I think we're direct by default in a way. You know, in other words, we just can't be anything else in a way. So we are.
I could be a cowboy.
Phil Spector was involved there, John. I think
Yes.
somebody that you're pretty fond of.
Yeah, I'm fond of his work a lot. His personality, I'm not crazy about that, you know.
No.
But yeah, it was good to work with Phil because I always admired him, and he contributed a lot because he contributed the Spector touch. But of course, if you play John Lennon Plastic Ono, Yoko Ono Plastic Ono, which he's involved in both, and you play Phil Spector's work, you see there's a vast difference.
Right.
We never gave him his head, you know, we didn't let him go free on it.
Did he want,
Otherwise
did he
it would
want
be
it
all
at the
thing-
time?
He always wants to. I mean, he's got a tremendous ego.
Yes.
He considers the artist like that film director considers actors just pieces of garbage,
Canned
goods that you bring on and you wheel off. You know, he'd like to bury the artist, and so the production is the main thing. But we didn't allow him to do that to us. But so on that level, it was very good because we used what we considered was his amazing ear for pop music and sound, but without letting it become Spector, you know, to thousands of castanets.
The wall of
the wall.
sound.
We didn't want the wall of sound,
No, right.
but we wanted the outside input.
God's Song, critics said, some of the finest of all rock singing on the last verse. I wonder where I got that from. I've got it written down.
Who
in
is
front
this
of me.
Thank you
wonderful
very
critic?
much.
Where is he when we need him?
I
You know,
know,
who
I
is it?
know.
I want to send him a card.
I've been wending my way through some notes, and that particular quote happened to come out.
Well, that's the
I
I
wish
don't
they
believe
had
in, right?
sent us personal notes about it. you
Well,
know.
we probably got it in our filing cabinet.
Or
you know.
something, right?
You have a
You tend to
filing
remember.
cabinet.
Oh, we got files of all the press clippings. Again, I don't know why we were discussing all this stuff last time, but we were making that disco rock cut that we played to you earlier, which
Yes.
you can mention or not mention your own choice. But going back and thinking what we were doing and what we'd done, and whether you tend to remember the dig from a critic rather than the praise. You see, that's why I'm looking at you like, oh, somebody liked it. I had this impression that everybody hated the record, and it was only regarded well about 8 years later when they'd started saying, well, it's not as good as Plastic Ono Band, about the work I was doing later, you see.
1970, as we move through, in February, Instant Karma, which was top 5, both here and in, or rather, I say here because we're here in
We're-
America, but here in America and in Britain as well. And you actually appeared on Top of the Pops. That was the first appearance by anybody connected with the Beatles for quite a while, wasn't it?
It was great. I love being first. We were talking about this last
I
night.
know,
It's amazing.
funny. I
How
can't
did you
believe it.
feel about doing Top of the Pops
Oh, it was
after
great.
quite a time gap?
I love it. You know, I missed the again. I was talking to Yoko about the cabin today because there was 2 girls standing outside our apartment today, and they've been standing off and on for the last 5 years, right through the so-called hiatus. You know, when I was supposed to be buried alive with like Howard Hughes, and I'd talk to them. You know, I'd say hi. I said I saw you running across the park and all that. And as we got in the car, I said to Yoko, you know, this is like the cabin. That's how we were with the fans. You know, they'd be at the door as we went in at lunchtime, and they'd say, "Hey John, will you sing, you know, Sweet Little 16 for Margie and Pam, you know?" And it was on that level. I said, that's the kind of thing I miss, was the direct communication where you could talk to the audience.
Yeah.
And you get in that sort of Madison Square Shea Stadium business where you have to overact, you know, you have to act like 18th century actors of grand drama, which is not my shtick. And I like that direct communication. That's why I like radio too. And I enjoyed the Instant Karma thing because the people are right there. And we were talking about the fact that she was knitting, you see, because we did everything together. Now, she wasn't singing on Instant Karma. So I'm doing Instant Karma live, or it was a backing tape with live vocal, I think. And she's just sitting there knitting this scarf, and there was some review the next day, how dare she sit there knitting, you know? But we wanted to be together, and her contribution to that event, instead of having a smoke bomb or a coloured light, a psychedelic light, Yoko Ono knitted.
Yeah.
You see, and what are they doing? There's a film of that. I wish I could get hold of it.
Knitting that goes nowhere in a way, you know. And knitting is something very interesting. I mean, it's almost like sort of knitting a web or whatever, you know, web of the mind and all that, you know. There's something to it, really.
It's kind of meditation. I think it's a...
Yeah, I've tried it and I'm a desperate failure. We won't go into that. I'm useless with a couple
I
of...
used to do embroidery, and my auntie told me how to do little flowers and things like that.
Mother was released, in fact, in the United States of America, wasn't it? In 1971 as a single, but not in Britain.
I don't know why. I can't remember why not. Probably didn't think it would make it as a single in England, that's all.
Did you have total control over your product in those days, John?
Not really, no.
Well, pretty much we decided what went out and what didn't go out. You know, we had
That's
to fight with the
true,
company
but we
all the
had to
time,
fight a
like the
little.
live piece thing. You know, that they didn't want to put out, or they didn't like cold turkey, and they weren't too crazy. They didn't really like the extra Beatles stuff. You know, they preferred to keep us as in a box. So, but on the artistic level, yeah, we controlled it.
When you
Sure.
say, when you
I
say,
mean, we took we even made the covers ourselves. You know, with Instamatic cameras and Polaroid. Cover of Imagine, Yoko took with a Polaroid.
I would imagine that having to fight though must be a tiring procedure mentally. I mean, it must get very
Well, it was
boring.
was-
sort of like an invisible fight, you know. They wouldn't really come out and say this and that, but it was sort of discouraged in a very subtle way.
Two
you know.
Virgins was a big fight. That was like 9 months later it came out. It was held up for 9 months now. So Joseph Lockwood, who I still like, I don't know if he passed away or not, but you know, he was a nice guy. But he sat down on a big table up at the top of EMI with John and Yoko and told me he'll do everything he can to help
stop
us.
it.
No, to help us
Oh,
the first
really?
time. Yeah,
Oh.
don't you kidding? To help us put Two Virgins out, because we explained what it meant and why we were doing it. And he said that he understood it and he'd do everything he can to help us. And when we tried to put it out, he sent a personal note to everybody saying, don't print it, don't put it out. See, so we couldn't get the cover printed anywhere. It was really due out about 9 months before it came out.
And it didn't come out as Capitol Record, you know. It was, I think it came out as Tetra Gramophone or whatever.
Yeah, over here we couldn't. We had to go with some other firm, you know. But now you can't get it for $200.
Now, somebody told me this when we came into this studio this morning, actually, that the Fly album is going for $35 at the moment. People are like,
Yes.
she smiles when I say that.
Yeah, down in the village.
Well, I wish I had some. Right.
1971, you were both resident in New York, and Yoko, I think you were going through problems because you had a custody situation for your daughter. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
More pressure.
That's true, you know. I don't know how we survived. I mean, we went through so many different kinds of pressure, but
I mean, the picture as I see it in front of me was that just when things were getting good, something else would rear its ugly head and maybe cause you a few mental problems.
But you know, it was very strange because we were always having a dialogue and we were always sort of inspired by each other. And that kept us going. And also, in a way, I think that we're always giggling, you know. Don't you
Yeah,
think?
we tried to, you know,
Yeah.
be. If we hadn't taken some of it with a pinch of salt, I think we would have both gone under. You know, I mean, it was pretty hard. But usually one could sustain and support the other. But there were times when we both would go down. You know, and it's very hard because the tendency is to go to drink or drugs, and it's very hard to get out then. But you can't when you're involved with legal court cases or immigration problems. One has to be right on the ball.
Absolutely.
Oh, I know.
But it might have done our work good, it might have done it harm, I can't really tell yet. You know, we seem to just go ploughing on anyway, producing it. But still, I wonder how it would have been had we not been, you know, been harassed. But one cannot always blame everything on the outside, you know. Whatever happened to us was also partly our creation. And it was probably to do with complete self-involvement and not really taking care of business on an outside level and looking where we were going, you know, instead of looking down the road, we're always looking in each other's eyes. So we're not taking the position that society did everything to us.
No.
We take responsibility as well. I mean, accidents happen and things do happen to you, but we do take some responsibility for the situation.
A custody fight is really, you know, I mean, we didn't have to go through that, really. And we shouldn't have done it on the level of court cases and whatnot. But at the same time, on hindsight, I think that at least Yoko would remember that we were interested in her, you know. So that's
very
sort
important.
of like a byproduct. You
We
know.
still don't know where
That
they
was
are.
good.
Really?
Oh no, we haven't seen hiding a hair of them. She has a piece of paper saying custody, that's it.
Incredible situation.
But so many things that happened to us were so incredible that we just couldn't help. I mean, we just had to say to each other, isn't this amazing, you know, and just laugh about it. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it, you know.
Hard to
laugh
do.
is so,
Yeah, it was like a Pinter play, you know, only we were
so
in
I
it.
can't
you know, and
believe
it
this.
never
I can't
ended.
believe this, you know.
March 71, I keep pulling out these date lines, but they're important.
Excuse me.
Power to the People, another one to add to the collection. Any memories of that now? It's not that long ago, really, but it's 9 years as we sit here in this
Seems hell long ago.
December day in 1980. Does it seem a hell of a long time ago to you?
Oh, it just seems like Power to the People. Wasn't that the First World War? No, it wasn't. Anyway, I remember that that was the sort of the expression going round those days, and Tariq Elliott kept coming around wanting money for the Red Mole or some magazine, you know. And I used to give anybody it was sort of left field, avant-garde, or so in the art field or the political field money, kind of out of guilt as well, because I was thinking, well, I'm working class and I'm not one of them, but I'm rich, so therefore I have to. So anytime somebody said something, I would fork out, you know. And he was hustling for whatever he was hustling for. And I kind of wrote Power of the People in a way, kind of as a guilt song, you know? Sort of, I better do that, you know?
But incidentally, we heard it last night just by accident, so to speak.
Good intro.
And it's very heavy, very good. Yeah,
yeah, not bad. To me, it's like a newspaper song, you know, when you write about something instant that's going on right now. And I don't call it a well-crafted song or anything. It's just that was the news headline, you know, with misprints and everything. But the B-side was Open Your Box, which is worth a play. Yoko Ono in all her finery.
And which was banned at the time.
Again, it was banned because box in America means something to do with the female anatomy below the waist.
Beautifully put, sir. Beautifully put.
Yes.
We moved to Imagine in November 1971. John, it wasn't released as a single until November 1975. That's a 4-year gap.
Really?
And I think if you said to most...
I can't believe it, really.
Yeah, really? And if you were to say to most music programmers around the world which would be the John Lennon track that they would instantly pick to play, I think it would be Imagine. It's had fantastic airplay.
Amazing. It was 75. It was made in 72 and put out in 75.
November 1971 you did the Imagine album, and it was released in November 1975 eventually as a single. And I remember trying to find it on a single. I think you could get it on an American import for a while, but eventually I think I'm right in saying that Great Britain finally decided to do something with it and put it out as a single.
Well, I must say I'm blank on why that would have happened. It must have been either because Klein and EMI or whoever was
decided that maybe it's a bit too political.
Too political, or were it'll sell the album better, or whatever reasoning they had for it, because it was a single in America, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
And I think it was something to do with they wanted to sell the album, so make them buy the album to get it, some garbage like that. It surprises me. Well, actually, that should be credited as a Lennon-Ono song, because a lot of it, the lyric and the concept came from Yoko, but those days I was a bit more selfish, a bit more macho, and I sort of omitted to mention her contribution. But it was right out of Grapefruit, her book. There's a whole pile of pieces about imagine this and imagine that, and I give her credit now, long overdue.
Well, I mean, everything we did together in those days, we just inspired each other. So, you know, there's that. It's hard not to get inspired.
Yeah, but if it had been Bowie, I would have put Lennon Bowie. If it had been a male, you know, when we wrote Fame together, or I wrote a couple, you know, did something with Harry Nilsson, Old Dirt Road, is Lennon Nielsen. But when we did it, I just put Lennon because, you know, she's just the wife and you don't put her name on, right?
Well, that's before Woman is the Nigger of the World, I suppose.
Yes.
Are we coming to that?
We are coming to that. We are indeed.
Up to the next band record, right?
Before we get to it, I have to say that on that Imagine album was a track called How Do You Sleep, which a lot of people considers was a swing at Mr. McCartney.
Well, I think I explained it pretty well in a Playboy interview, TNA, was that I used my resentment against Paul that I have as a kind of sibling rivalry resentment from youth to create a song.
Does it go back that far?
Oh, yeah. I mean, rivalry between two guys, you know? I mean, it was always there, but it was a creative rivalry.
Yes.
Like there was a rivalry between the Beatles and the Stones. It was a creative rivalry in that respect. Not a terrible, vicious, horrible vendetta, because it's not on that level. But one tends to, when interviewed by a print press, you see, now you can hear the tone of my voice, you see. So I can say, I felt resentment.
I can see your face, too.
Right, you can see the face, and you know what I'm saying is, I felt resentment, so I used that situation the same as I used with drawing from Heroin to write Cold Turkey. I used my resentment and withdrawing from Paul and the Beatles and the relationship with Paul to write How Do You Sleep. I don't really, go around with those thoughts in my head all the time. I wanted to make a funky track, and this is a good way to make it.
Yes.
Well, I remember when he was writing, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, you know. Oh,
we were laughing.
Wait till they see this, you know.
In fact, I got the line.
And it wasn't out of anger in a way. So it was the inspiration was maybe a tiny bit of
In
resentment.
fact, Klein gave me Another Day. I was saying, what is it? And he said, how about Another Day? And I said, You're Just Another Day, because that was some single he had out there. Well,
That's
I was
right. That was
falling
his
all over
first
the
single
floor
release.
laughing at that line, you know. But in print, it looks terrible. Or if I comment about it in like Rolling Stone or Playboy, it always looks like I'm freaking out about him, like Dr. Jekyll or something. It's not that at all. You know?
Right. In 72, a deportation case.
Dun, 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 dun.
Can you imagine all this? I mean, it's
What a
incredible,
life! Let's
isn't
make a
it?
movie.
As I sit here
believe
talking
it.
to you,
For
I'm
two
finding
people,
it hard to
two
believe.
very
You've been through a
naive
lot. You really
Yeah.
have been through a
boys
lot.
and girls.
Through the mill.
But Mayor Lindsay in New York did a lot of things on your behalf, did he not, around
Yeah.
about that era?
He was very good to us, and you know, said lots of things like, you know, we should welcome artists to our shores because this is the haven, isn't it? It's got the big Iron Lady out in the sea there saying welcome to the shores, you know, and they were trying to kick me out, and it's ridiculous when you look back on it, because the most I could have done was gather a big gang of you know, demonstrators together, which the police could have shot, you know. So what are they complaining about?
Wait a second. When we did the bedding in Toronto, was it, or
Yeah.
that there was a specific instruction, I understand, from the government to the press, the American press, that they should not put us on the front page, because they did initially when we did the bedding. So I think that we were thinking that our peace and love movement was very subversive. But in fact, the government was very aware of it, it seems like, you know.
Yeah.
They caught on, you know. Maybe the people didn't catch on, but
We were the
it's
kind
like
of
that.
the court jesters of the youth movement.
Did you see
That
yourself
period.
really as the court jesters of the youth movement? Interesting
Yeah,
phrase.
well, now I do, looking back, you know, because we tried to do it with humour. It was really irrelevant what sort of serious critics in the pop business said about what we were doing in bed and bags and that. As long as our what we felt our duty or our position was to keep on about peace until something happened, you know. And we, you know, it was in the tradition of Gandhi, only with a sense of humour.
June 1972, sometime in New York City, which we referred to a little bit earlier on because it included the live side. And it was a collaboration between the two of you and Elephant's Memory. Phil Spector was involved. Frank Zappa was involved as well.
Yeah, because he was appearing at the Fillmore or some dance hall in New York,
Yeah,
famous
the
one.
Fillmore
Yes,
East.
Fillmore,
Yeah, and we bumped into him somewhere, and he said, will you come down and jam with us? So we thought, great, okay, we'll go down. We just come from London about a week before or something. We went down there, and I did an old Olympics number, the B-side of Young Blood, or I'm not sure what it was. It was called Well, you know. It was a 12-bar kind of thing that I used to do at the Cavern. It was the B-side of some hit American record, and Yoko did Yoko. Right, which one did he do?
I don't remember.
Well, it was something mad anyway. And it was pretty good with Zappa because he's pretty far out, as they say.
He is, isn't he? Yes,
So we
extraordinary
blended
gentleman.
quite well. So it was a combination of sort of mad rock and what I consider newspaper-style writing of songs about what was currently going on, like Attica State or Woman is the Nigger or whatever the...
But it was really like Bertolt Brecht, you know. I mean, that the style of writing was, you know. And I thought it was pretty interesting theatre, you know.
Well, that's what I didn't know anything
That's
about
another
Brecht.
thing. We had...
But she took me to see that play, didn't she?
yes.
Trip in the Opera.
Yeah, it's like that. But then also, so in the classical field, I'm sure people would understand it. But I mean, somehow in the pop field, they thought, well, you know. But the cover, the record cover, we had Chairman Mao and Nixon naked dancing together. And of course, I mean, this is the sort of thing that we had to fight, you know. I thought it was great. But then, without telling us, they put a little... what is it? Sort of like a sales stamp or something on top of it.
But you couldn't even
nobody can-
steam it off.
Really?
So they wouldn't have Nixon and Mao dancing naked together, you know.
And that's our record company doing that to us.
To us, you know.
Yeah, without
So
telling us. You
Kids
know?
were writing into us and complaining because they'd go to the supermarket, wherever you buy them, buy the record, and then they try and get this label saying the latest or, you know, some sales hype on it, and you couldn't get it off. It ripped the cover to shreds. You know.
Yeah.
Just petty crap, you know. They could have covered it without ruining it, so as when you got home you could unveil it. Well, what the hell? I mean, you couldn't see any pubic hair. It was just two bodies. We just stuck that was her idea. She just stuck their two heads on.
Yeah.
And it was hysterical, but you can't see it now.
Because, you know, sense of humor was part of art, you know, as John says. But also, I really think it's interesting that they started, by then, the record company, I think, was very nervous because they felt that we were being so controversial and all that, you know. And so they really started to do that. But it's interesting that they were so nervous, you know.
Can I talk to you about Woman as the Nigger of the World, Yoko?
Well,
Go on.
Memories.
well, what about it?
Tell me about it and how it came to be.
Well, you see, the thing was, well, I have to be honest about it. I mean, you know, in New York I was an artist and I was sort of doing my own thing. And I was pretty sort of free. And then I went to London and I was doing these gallery shows and whatnot, and concerts and all that. And then I met John. And then right smack sort of I was put in this sort of situation of, you know, 4 men who are from Liverpool and their lot or whatever, they're all from Liverpool or whatever. And this was the first experience, taste of, what is it? Now, I wouldn't say it was first experience because, no, that's not true. But
Get on.
All right. I felt, you know, this sort of big machoism, you know. And nothing to do with their songs. I mean, their songs are beautiful and lovely and all that.
We know.
But I mean, you know, as people, you know, I was thinking, what is this? What is this? And I was really sort of naive about it all, you know, in a way. Though in New York, I must say, as an artist, I did confront the homosexual mafia kind of situation where, you know, the art world was controlled by the homosexuals, gay people, shall we say.
Happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, right, of those days. And there was that, but I didn't feel it that much, really. And this time was sort of like a personal situation where I started to feel, well, I mean, what are we going to do? For instance, it's
We
just
did the interview with Nova.
Do you want to...
No, go on.
It's all right?
Yes.
Well, so we did an interview with Nova. And when I think I was asked some questions and all that, and I just, well, you know, woman is the nigger of the world. And that was quoted on Nova cover or something.
Which is a dead magazine. It was a magazine in England at the time. Like
I remember it.
Like Vogue or something.
Well, because you see, like in the breakfast table or something, they said we have a morning paper, and I would just sort of start naturally look the papers, and John said, oh, well, but, you know, because he was used to looking at the
Don't
paper
touch
first.
the papers till Dad's
You know.
read it, you know.
The Sunday Morning Blues, yes,
you know,
that's
you
right.
don't touch
And I'm
papers till
thinking,
Dad has it, you know,
What
slippers
is
and
this?
ties.
You know, what is this?
She
Me,
couldn't
a
believe
guy
it, you know.
supposed to read the papers first, you know. I couldn't believe it.
Unwritten
you know,
English
just
law,
on that
Yoko.
kind of,
Unwritten English law.
you know, on a trivial level. But I mean, all these things, you know, accumulate, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why I was inspired to say woman is the nigger of the world. I mean, you know, directly inspired by
but
life
living
with
with a person who knew how to
Yeah,
treat
right.
a nigger, right?
So I think,
Well, anyway, I took the title and wrote the song "Woman Is the Nigger of the World," which I believe was long before Helen Reddy's "I Am Woman, Hear Me Scream." So it was the first woman's liberation song, as far as I'm concerned, and it was directly quoted from her. But her singing it probably would have not got on the air. But she did do "Sisters Oh Sisters," which we did reggae on the B-side. It turned out to be the B-side. But I remember that session because Elephant's Memory, all New York kids, you know, saying they didn't know what reggae was. You know, I'm trying to say it's yeah, yeah. You know, I'm trying to explain to them. The only lick I knew to teach him was the Israelite, that Desmond Dekker thing.
yes.
So if you listen to it, you'll hear me going trying to get them to reggae. 10 years later, they write to me saying, "Oh, we understand reggae now. Any work?" You know, screw you, kid. It's too much hard work. You know what I mean?
Woman is the nigger of the world.
And
then.
that was banned in America again because you couldn't say
the word
nigger.
nigger.
Although our good friend and old friend Dick Gregory helped us by getting us in the black magazines. They're called Ebony, and there's one other which I've forgotten the name of, and posing with pictures for us. And a lot of black guys stood up and women and said, "We understand what he's saying. We're not offended." But the ones who were offended were all the honky whites. So that wasn't played on the air either. You could never hear it. Ballad of John and Yoko, by the way, was banned over here. So what they did was they turned the word, because they don't like the word Christ, you know, unless you're wearing a white robe, you can't say Christ here. So they turned it round so it would go, You know it ain't easy. You know, so that's how they fixed that one. And Woman is the Nigger, we were on a TV talk show, Dick Cavett show, which was like a kind of Eamon Andrews. I don't know who's the current in England now, but one of those.
Michael Parkinson, Russell Harty.
Oh, hello, Michael. How are you? Manchester, how are you? So anyway, Granada used to be. So, right. He, Dick Cavett, had this national TV show, and he was willing to let us sing it because he was a liberal, quote unquote. And the company, there's a big hullabaloo backstage, and we did manage to do it live on his show once, but the hullabaloo was amazing. I mean, it was like, I'd trodden on the flag or something.
We moved to
But now, doesn't it look silly?
Yes.
I mean, isn't it incredible?
But so many situations that you've talked about begin to look silly in retrospect as you look backwards now.
Yeah, I know, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But when you think, it's such a beautiful statement. What she was saying is, it's true. Woman still is the nigger. There's only one. You can talk about blacks, you can talk about Jews, you can talk about the third world, you can talk about everything, but underlying that whole thing, under the whole crust of it, is the women, and beneath them children. As Dick Gregory said in 1969 to us in Denmark, children's liberation is the next movement. Because they have no rights whatsoever. Absolutely none. Women have a certain amount. But children is the next thing. But the women will liberate the children.
Well, just the other day, Sean was coming to me. And he was very serious, and he's 5 years old. He just said, "Mommy, when you say something, they take it seriously. But when I say something, they don't believe me."
He said that.
And so I said, "Well, I'm very sorry. That's how it is. And grown-ups really don't understand. And it's bad.
Yeah. December 1972, Happy Christmas, War is Over, which will doubtless be played hundreds of times on British and maybe even American radio.
Yeah, they do play it here, thank God.
Well, they do play it in Britain as well, John. They play it an awful lot.
Good.
I'm as guilty as the next disc jockey.
Well, we're very proud of that, and we both sang together on that one, so we made it might have been our first pop, straight pop record together. And Phil was the producer. And it was a beautiful session, and the kids singing were beautiful.
It was a Harlem Community Choir, was it not?
Yeah, it was a really nice, pleasant thing. And basically I said to Phil, give me the backing you gave to George on a thing that George wrote for Ronnie Spector, and it's slipped my mind now, which is Try Some, Buy Some. If you want to do some comparison shopping and listen to the track Try Some, Buy Some that George made with Ronnie Spector or whatever, you'll hear the idea for the backing there, which is what we did. But as usual, we messed it up. We recorded it a bit too late. We almost missed the Christmas market that year with that record.
You got to number 4 in Britain.
I think we got it out earlier in Britain than we did in America. Something held us up. I can't remember. There's so many things going on. But what we wanted to do was have something besides White Christmas being played every Christmas, And there's always a war, right?
Yeah.
There's always somebody getting shot. So every year you can play it, and there's always somebody being tortured or shot somewhere. So the lyric stands in that respect.
There's also, for some strange reason in Britain, an incredible fight to get the number 1 record at Christmas.
Well, the same here.
Joyously orientated or just by whoever it happens to be. But I've always found that very, very strange.
Yeah. But I always wanted to write something that would be a Christmas record that would last forever, And maybe that's not the one. Maybe we'll... Well, I'd hope they reissue it forever. But also we did the poster event, which is also War is Over if you want it.
You might be interested to know that every Christmas since you released that single, I've received a new copy every year, wherever I've been broadcasting.
Oh, fantastic. I wish they send us one. I don't even have one.
That's nice.
My producer Paul Williams and myself have had a copy each this Christmas, as indeed we did last year and the year before.
What do they put on the other side?
Beautiful.
Now you've got me.
That would be fascinating. Maybe they put it on both sides, the DJ copy kind of stuff.
But it comes around every year.
Great, isn't that great?
That's beautiful.
It's a little something you didn't know here in the UK.
I want to say something while it's in my mind, because we keep talking about this Plastic Ono Band, Plastic Ono Band,
Yes.
Plastic Ono Band. Plastic Ono Band was a concept of Yoko's, which is a imaginary band. The first advert for the Plastic Ono Band was a photograph of some pieces of plastic with a tape recorder and a TV in it, because they didn't have this great material that they have now, lasers and lights and machines that can do all this stuff. And her idea was a completely robot pop group. That was what she must have thought of us all when she first came into the world, because she immediately said, "Oh, I've got an idea, this band." And the first advert was a page out of the London telephone book of the Joneses. This was in the NME and all the papers, you know.
Yes.
And pictures of these plastic things. And there was supposed to be a party for the release of the Give Peace a Chance record, which was the first Plastic Ono Band record, but we'd had a car crash or something in Scotland and we couldn't come. So at the dance hall where they had the party for the opening of the Plastic Ono Band, well, all the press came to meet the band. And the band was on stage. It was just a machine with a camera pointed at them, showing them on the stage themselves. You're making an awful lot of noise here, Yoko.
I'm just putting my...
Just putting a coat on. You put your coat on.
Are you with me?
Yes.
So the Plastic Ono Band is a conceptual band. There never have been any members of it. And the advert said, you are the Plastic Ono Band. So I just want to clear that. It wasn't a reforming a new band like a Wings or a Hollies or whatever, where you have a name and you belong to it. There's nobody ever been in that band. There are no members.
Right.
While I was telling this wonderful story, ladies and gentlemen, Yoko was putting a fur coat on and Paul Williams was writing messages on the mic so you can hear the pen and the paper rattling, you see.
That's the accompaniment. It's
Oh,
the
I see.
music accompaniment.
I'd like a break, yes,
Yes.
because I have to go to the...
Should we do
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
You are doing
Yeah,
it.
I didn't want to. It's marvellous.
Yeah. Oh,
I
I'm
didn't want to
enjoying
interrupt
it.
you, see,
Oh, you're
I thought
really-
you might
You're
I
really
love
happy.
it, love
You're
it,
really happy.
because you're telling us stuff that we've
Fantastic
forgotten,
stuff.
and the fact that they play the Christmas record, it makes me want to cry. The fact that people remember we made these
Gospel
things,
Truth, John. Every year that record comes
because
out.
we feel as though, like, you know, you do tend to remember the hardships more. And you think that nobody appreciated, maybe John Peel once listened to something, you know,
That's all
and
right.
nobody ever
That's
heard
okay.
it, and it was just. You know,
Do you remember the reception at Chelsea Town Hall for the Plastic Ono Band?
that's what I was talking when they were
When-
messing
'cause-
around here.
'cause I used to be with Carl in music at the other end of Savile Row. So I mean, I
Yeah, and
guys,
the-
and we went there, and
You were there
robots-
then?
Oh yeah, all lighting up.
Right.
And we got the whole thing going. Remember, like the at Christmas when we all got the line.
Yeah, the conga, because Derek Taylor described what happened there to me.
It was
Oh,
incredible.
we've got a heater here. We can put the heater on, but it makes a noise.
Yes.
It was incredible. I mean, the whole thing, you know, because we were confused.
He
I
was
mean,
there.
I was-
Here, you can take
I
him
was
off now. We're gonna
okay.
take
I
him
was confused because we thought there was going to be a new band. And
Yeah,
then there was
right.
there was the
I'm going to do it.
plastic
I'm
all the
nearly-
lights.
I'm nearly
Right,
finished.
right.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Nowadays, you could do it great. You know, you could really make a band that virtually was played your records or whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
But the idea being that the camera would be on the audience, and they would, instead of all this, what we're always trying to say, this idea of the leader or the hero, you know, that is not part of the audience, as if there's no connection. And the thing was to kind of bring the audience to realise that without them there is no band, and vice versa, to bring it into one space. That we all create that great concert wherever it is. We all create that record. The record doesn't exist till you listen to it. What's that famous thing like? Does New York exist because we're in here? Right? It's on that sort of level. You know, is it out there or is it just not there when we're in here? It's that idea.
I understood. I understood that immediately on that. It was it was such fun at that Chelsea thing as well. It was real fun. Everybody really sort of. It was incredible.
Because also we didn't want to get stuck with the band, you know,
No, of course
with
not.
four guys waiting to work all
Because
the
we all
time.
went
You
along.
know.
I was invited by
Yeah,
people
great.
to go along, and
That's
I was
great.
expecting to see the Plastic Ono Band.
Amazing.
Right? And after there's a little bit of confusion, the people there realised that it was there wasn't.
That was it.
It was great fun.
But people still talk about it like it was a real, you know, he was in the Plastic Ono Band, then he was in the Plastic Ono Band. I have to go for Pete. No, I'd love you to take 1 or 2 shots. Yeah.
Take a couple.
we
My
collect-
terrible pen tags.
We collect pictures. You work pen tags.
There's someone, Bill's just rang with someone on the line from Canada. Apparently the State Department have invited you to go this weekend for some big rock concert to sort of get over any feelings of sour grapes. And they want to lay on the plane and the whole bit. And they've got
In
a castle.
Canada?
In Canada, yeah, for a big rock concert. I heard something about this before, but never.
We'll get a bit more detail, find out who's on.
Do you think you can?
There's someone on the line in
Maybe
Canada from the
something
State
important.
Department or something.
The
From
State
Bill.
Department or something. I don't know.
Well, do you want to talk to him?
It sounds very unlikely.
Do you think so? Well,
Yes,
do you
I mean, but it could be possible.
Well, is it a
Sounds
person?
ridiculous.
In the State Department, I mean, that you're talking.
Who's on the line from Canada?
I can't see it. The State Department not promoting us in a rock concert. They just threw us out the fucking country, didn't they?
Represents John Lennon.
And anyway, if you're going to make a reappearance in a hostile environment, I mean, go to another hostile environment, not the same one.
Well, let's see, you know, if it's something like, if,
I don't want to sit in that fucking immigration office at Toronto Airport ever. Yeah.
So what this bloke is saying is the immigration department is inviting you, and they're offering to charter a plane 30 people to take other people over for this. Apparently it's a massive rock concert, and they want a sort of peace thing as well at it, and they're offering to put you up in the castle this weekend.
In a castle?
Now why it's suddenly happening I don't know, but I've asked for the immigration department to ring us direct in the next half an hour in Canada.
It sounds great, then we could take, if we could get Eric and George and a few people.
And all that to see us this time, it would be great.
Sounds quite good, this Canadian thing.
Yes, it does, you know.
Charter
The only thing is the name of Hugh Curry
castle.
came on the line first. I've got Richie York outside from Canada just to make his pay
Richie York?
He's a Rolling Stone man with a ginger walrus moustache.
Oh, we saw
that
out
one,
there,
yeah, I've seen
That's
him.
right. He wants to pay his respects
Yeah.
because he's doing George Monday.
Maybe he would know that.
And then that's it, and thanks.
Yeah, maybe he knows a bit about Canada.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
right.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's first
Well,
get
Nigel can come and
first.
sit down as well, you know.
No, but Nigel should be the first one, shouldn't it? Because I don't know, he's been waiting a lot. I don't
Richie's coming in and going, you see.
know. Okay,
And then ring.
Okay. Maybe it sounds great, you know, for this weekend, and we just go and do it. Give peace a chance.
But we couldn't really do... Hi, how are you?
Hi.
We just seem to be, maybe help us here. We just seem to be getting
Listen,
wires
yes.
from the Canadian immigration.
Oh,
for us
really?
to, they'll give us a chartered plane of 30 to go and
Yes.
play at a rock concert this weekend.
And
Tomorrow,
to put us
yeah.
up in a castle or something.
Yeah,
What's this?
Oh, well,
I can,
what?
yeah.
What is
It's
it?
the immigration
Is it-
department or something.
There's a Toronto rock and roll revival on tomorrow, which has Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent and Little Richard and all. You know, they got them all together, and Kim Fowley and the Doors, and you know, it's a nice little scene. And I know the two guys who are running it, but I didn't know. You know, I didn't know.
Is
I
it
just
the people who's
Can they
running
get State
it that's
Department? Have they
inviting
got
us, or is
access?
the State
They
Department?
probably have.
doing it?
They probably have because they have pretty good political connections with their fathers.
Oh. I don't know.
Well, we seem to be getting invites from the immigration department. I'm not sure about it.
Do you want to find out? Do you think you can find out for us? I mean, it would be very
Yeah,
nice if you
yeah,
could
sure.
do it.
Call them up. Yeah.
You know who's
I know the two
inviting.
guys,
It's the
'cause I
State
sort of helped them put it
Department
together.
inviting.
What's the name? Is it
Then
John
it makes
someone?
it
John Brown.
some sense.
Oh, well, he was the one who was on the phone just now, John Brown.
Oh, really?
He was just talking to Bill upstairs, yeah.
Good God.
Well, look, we can ring back. I'll get his number. Have you got
Okay.
his number? I can get it from Bill upstairs.
I've got it in my bag. Just let me get my bag.
Get your
outside.
bag, okay. We'll check.
We'll find out how much too.
Yes, yes, all that.
Do you want to bring that?
Hello?
Bill?
Yes?
Was that John Brower that just phoned?
John Brower.
Was it?
John Brower, yes.
It was?
Yes.
And have you got his number there as well?
Here we are.
No, he's gonna get. Oh. No, I didn't take his number.
It's okay, well I think we've got it in, but it was John Brower.
Yes.
Okay, and he's the organiser, isn't he?
He's the producer of it, yes.
The producer, great, okay.
How are things going? I mean, what's happening?
Well, we're waiting for the immigration to call, but it sounds hopeful.
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
so,
if it's,
yeah.
yes, if it's that kind of nice scene, you
So-
know,
Yeah, well, it looks like it, yeah.
sounds like a nice
Will it won't turn into a rockers festival?
Oh, no, there's not that sort of thing.
So if you got
Well,
the
you see,
number,
it'd be
we can
nice
get
if
one
we
of
could
seven.
get a group together to take over. I wonder if George would do it out if he wouldn't have to sing that Stones concert.
No, but if it's Canada, he might, you know, it's not
No, I
like
doubt if he'd come to
doing
Canada.
London.
No.
Yeah, wouldn't.
Oh, I don't need Ringo, I just need a group, you know.
Would Paul go?
No. I mean, there's only George is the only hope. He was going to do the Hyde Park with me,
George
but
and
then
Eric might go.
Eric might come. But I mean, could you ring George and ask could he get me a group together for tomorrow night for Canada?
Goodness, and that's fine.
Okay, we are rolling.
Rolling.
November 1973 and the Mind Games album, John.
This is the BBC World Service.
You do that well, you do that well.
Yes, I was listening in. I told you before, Bermuda, Singapore, Cape Town. May I just comment on that?
Please do.
Come to mind.
Please do.
I read the papers when the PM, Margaret Thatcher, was going to cut the BBC World Service down. That would be the greatest disservice to peace, love and understanding in the world, because one really appreciates it, and every country does, that you don't know how important it is. that the English-speaking, our point of view, our way of life, meaning the West, and our whole ideals are presented by the BBC, and they're the only ones that can do it. The Americans don't have the system, they don't have the contacts in all the countries because they didn't have the Commonwealth of the Empire. And from India to Cape Town to everywhere, they would be a great disservice to the world if it was ever cut down. I believe it. They did allow it to stay, but
yes, they did.
I think that would be better to sell off some of the church property and finance the radio. Or something, you know what I mean, whatever it is, because it's very important and people appreciate it all over, and not just English people living abroad or whites living in Australia, but all the races on earth listen to that. And it's very important, and because I travel and listen, I hear it and I talk to people about it, and everybody's listening. So, mind games.
The BBC World Service.
Mind games is what they're playing with the world, and they have to keep it up.
1973 is only 7 years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah, we're getting close.
We're getting closer. We're getting closer. It's another one of your much-played tracks, actually, the title track, Mind Games, isn't it?
Oh, well, that's good. That was a fun track because the voice is in stereo, and the seeming orchestra on it is just me playing 3 notes with a slide guitar. The middle 8 is reggae. Trying again to explain to American musicians what reggae was in 1973 was pretty hard. But it's basically a reggae middle 8 if you listen to it. Love is the answer. It goes... But it was hard telling these, they didn't know what reggae was then. Yeah. I'm glad it's played. It ain't bad.
Do you follow what's played of your material on American radio? Because here we are in New York. I've been listening a lot to American radio. I found it very interesting. Are you an avid radio listener? You've just mentioned the World Service, so obviously you do listen to radio. What about music radio?
Well, for a long time I wasn't listening to music because to the pop radio, the rock and roll stuff, because it would either cause me to get sweaty, because it would bring back memories I didn't want to know about, or I would get that feeling that I'm not alive because I'm not making it. And if it was good, I hated it because I wasn't doing it. If it was bad, I was furious because I could have done better or whatever. So I didn't get involved, and I listened to classical and music and stuff like that mainly for 5 years. But now, once I started tuning in again to pop, of course, I'm on the dial all the time. I have a TV on with no sound and play the radio mainly.
And just for feminists in England, I'm sure there are many feminists
Both
in
of
England
them.
too.
There are a lot.
But while John made Imagine, I made Approximately Infinite Universe. And when John was making Mind Games, I made a record called Feeling the Space. And both albums are full of feminist songs. Songs of women, let's put it that way.
Can you define a feminist, Yoko, as you would like to see one?
Well, John is a feminist.
Oh.
Anybody who's aware of women's struggle and what they had to go through in the male society.
Do you have specific feminists who you personally admire?
Well, I mean, I admire all women because they're all basically feminist. But at the same time, I mean, something like in America now that there are many feminist men starting to be aware of the feminist movement and all that. And I really appreciate that. And also, I mean, it's harder for men to become feminist, of course. But they're aware of the women's movement as part of the social structure and social movement. And I think that part is the most interesting because in the end, we have to really come together and work together about it. And I don't think without men's cooperation, in the end, it's not going to work, really.
Can I just tell Mr. Smith that we're getting a bit of breakup in our cans here? Is it all...
There's a problem.
Oh.
Problem not.
And I ought to say that during that period, you two went through a bit of a breakup, didn't you?
Yeah, I call it my lost weekend. It lasted 18 months when the feminist side of me died slightly, and she said, "Get the hell out."
And you took to jumping out of cars, I've been reading. This was one of your
once.
Oh, it was only once.
Well, I was pretty self-destructive at college too. When I was at art school in Liverpool, it was mainly one long drinking session. But when you're 18, 19, you can put away a lot of drink and not hurt your body so much, you know. But what I did when she kicked me out was I hit the bottle like I was 18 and 19, but when you're 30, whatever, 7 or whatever I was when that happened, 30, I don't know whatever I was, you can't take as much booze, but I was acting like I was still at college, you know, just whacking it out and going out all the time. And I remember at college, I always got a little violent on drink, but somehow I used to have a friend called Jeff Mohammed, rest his soul, who died. He was a half Indian Arab who was my friend at art school. He would be like a bodyguard for me, so whenever I'd get into some controversy, he would sort of ease me out of it. But I do recall at college punching through telephone box glass, you see. So it was a kind of self-destructive suicide side of me, which is resolving itself for the better, I believe, as I get older, because I never enjoyed it. You know, I mean, I don't like that waking up and thinking, what happened? Did I kill somebody? I mean, the Beatles' first national coverage was me beating up Bob Wooler at Paul's 21st party because he intimated I was homosexual. So I must have had a fear that maybe I was a homosexual to attack him like that. And it's very complicated reasoning. But I was very drunk and I hit him. And I could have really killed somebody then. And that scared me. Paul was 21, so I must have been 23 then. And that was in the Daily Mirror. It was the back page. I remember the picture. It was a posed picture from a Beatle posed on the docks picture, but it was pretty scary, and it was a kind of rehash of my youth. But of course, acting like a teenager in Hollywood, in public, with the press. See, what I would do as an individual in Liverpool would not go in the Liverpool Echo, right? But when I would do something dumb like put a Kotex on my head in a restaurant, it becomes a national story. Or, you know, take a pee in the wrong place or something, you know, then it becomes a great, great event. But it damaged, it was a very unhealthy period for me. I couldn't deal with the separation any other way. I mean, you know, I just fell apart. And the only thing I knew was go to the bar and drink.
Which you did with a gentleman called Harry Nilsson.
Harry Nilsson and poor old Keith Moon. And various other, Ringo, who is not unknown to tipple a few himself. And it was a pretty hectic period, pretty wild, and it sounds funny in retrospect, but it was pretty miserable. Yeah, pretty bad period. And I'm thankful that I'm out of it, and I don't drink now because it scares me. You know, even a glass of wine knocks me out now, so I'm happy about that. Forget about the booze.
Walls and Bridges came along in 1974. It said that you wrote 10 songs in a period of a week to get that album together. Is that true?
I did. I don't know. It's all a blank.
I want to ask you...
I probably did, yeah. It might sound like that too. I don't know.
I want to ask you about writing. I mean, 10 songs in a week is a lot of pressure. How do you go about writing, John, these days? Because we'll be coming up to Double Fantasy in a not too distant future.
Yeah, well...
or the both of you as a combination, which is more important.
Looking back at it, whenever I comment about writing, I always seem to have been suffering, whether it was writing Day in the Life or whatever. You know, when I comment about it, everything is like it's some kind of suffering. So I always seem to have an intense time writing and thinking this is the end and nothing's coming and this is dumb and how can I do, you know, this is no good and all that business. So not writing for the 5 years, which I didn't pick up a guitar or anything, and not trying to write. Not making an attempt to write or anything like that. So what you said about Walls and Bridges applies to Double Fantasy. I was in Bermuda and Yoko was in New York doing some business. I was in Bermuda with Sean and the nanny and that kind of stuff. And then when we made a tentative decision to come, when the month was over in Bermuda, that we would make a record, I didn't have any material. Then suddenly it all came to me. All the songs that are on Double Fantasy all came within a period of 3 weeks in Bermuda after 5 years of nothing. Not trying, but nothing coming anyway. No inspiration, no thought, no anything. Then suddenly, boom, 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 boom.
See, both of us, but are sort of inspired writers, shall we say? So that when he writes, or I do that too, but it comes very fast, you know. But I mean, like he's a very fast writer, you know. So because it's an inspiration, it just comes through him. So it's just a matter of writing it down almost. And so when we did Double Fantasy, I was in New York and he was in Bermuda, and we would sort of communicate on the phone. And I would say, well, what about this, you know? And then he would call me maybe 4 hours later and say, what about this? We'd be singing to each other. And that was the dialogue. It was very strange, you know. And we went through sort of like a paradoxical feeling of, well, half resisting, you know, well, I don't want to hear a song now, I'm very tired, or, you know. But I've heard yours. Oh, right, well, let's hear it then, you know, that sort of thing. I went through that. And then we were going to go to the studio. And because of that, I felt, well, you know, are we going to really work together? I mean, is it going to be like we're both big-headed people, and so maybe we're going to fight like crazy over remix or this and that, you know, because we both have very definite ideas. And I'm sure that John felt that way too. John must have felt, well, can we really work together, you know? And it's after 5 years of not working, and there's that too. But somehow it was really surprising. I mean, you know, it's almost like people might feel disappointed hearing this because it's so too good to be true, but somehow we worked so well. And we were all prepared to so maybe have a difficult time, but don't you think so?
Yeah, it was the easiest session I've ever done, I think.
5 years is an awful long time. What sort of mental discipline did it involve resisting picking up a guitar? I mean,
well, it wasn't a matter of resisting. The first half a year or a year, I had this sort of feeling in the back of my mind that I ought to. And I'd go through periods of panic because I was not in the NME or the Billboard or being seen at Studio 54 with Mick and Bianca. I mean, you know, just I didn't exist anymore. I got a little fear of that would come, like a paranoia, and then it would go away because I'd be involved with the baby or involved with whatever other business that we were involved with. But that only lasted about 9 months, and then there was suddenly like it just went away. And I realized there was a life after death, you know, I mean, there was a life without it.
Did you enjoy that realization?
It was great. It was like, oh my God, and I would sit around thinking, what does this remind me of? What does this remind me of? I thought, this reminds me of being 15. I didn't have to write songs at 15. I wrote it if I wanted to, or I played rock and roll if I wanted to. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have some imaginary standard set up by me or some group of critics or whatever.
In other words, back to the days before the pressure started.
Yes, so it was before. So I sort of got back to that, and then that's when I suddenly could do it again with ease. I mean, the enjoyable part of the most enjoyable thing for me, apart from putting them on the tape when you first put them, is the inspirational in the spirit. That, because when the songs really come and you're not sitting down like a craftsman writing, I can do that. You know, you want a song about bananas for a movie, I could do that. Okay, you know, I'm quite capable of turning it out like that. I wouldn't enjoy it so much maybe, but I could do it on that level. But my joy is when you're like possessed like a medium, you know. I mean, I'll be sitting around and it'll come in the middle of the night or the time when you don't want to do it, you know. That's the exciting part. So I'm lying around and then this thing comes as a whole piece, you know, words and music. And I'm thinking, well, you know, can I say I wrote it? I don't know who the hell wrote it. I'm just sitting here and this whole damn song comes out. So you're like driven and you find yourself over on a piano or a guitar and you put it down because it's been given to you or whatever it is that you tune into.
How did you find him during this period, Yoko?
Yes, he was doing that, and of course I was doing that too. We're very similar that way, you know. So when it comes, it comes. So it comes in bunches, you know. And
but were you relieved that he had finally decided to lay down the guitar and rest?
Well, I mean, we weren't suffering or we weren't feeling worried when we were just relaxing. So there was no, you know, strong feeling of relief. In fact, the nicest thing about Double Fantasy was that while we were making, we were fully aware that we didn't have to make it. We were making it, we were enjoying it, but we could always go back to the other life because the thing was that we now know that we have the other life as well. It's not like we have to always be in the front, you know.
Yeah, so that was the joy of it. It's the same joy now. Had it not been accepted, and by now it has been well accepted in England and America and various parts north and south of the world. But if it hadn't, we would have been hurt, you know, and you know, whatever one would feel. But then one wouldn't have wanted to kill oneself, or you know, go back to the bottle because somebody didn't like your record or whatever. So knowing that gives you a kind of freedom that you have when you're younger, when you sort of don't have a past to live up to, and that's the joy of it. I have a past, but I don't have to live up to it.
Were your friends very surprised that you adopted that stance as far as taking the 5 years off were concerned? I mean, was there any external pressure which people put on you and said, come on, John, what's happening?
There was a lot of... That's why when you asked me, I think it was off mic before we started, you know, you got any English friends in town? Well, suddenly when Mick Jagger or David Bowie or Elton John came to town, I wouldn't respond, you know, because they'd always want me to go down to the studio or to the clubs, and I didn't want to get in there again. Or Harry Nilsson, you know. It's like birds of a feather. So I didn't want to go back in that pressure part of my life again. I wasn't ready to do that. And there was pressure from friends like that, you know. And Mick did this whole spiel in The Observer in London, which I read in Tokyo, because we spent half the first 3 years of Sean's life, half of the early 70s in Japan, 6, 7, 8 months at a time. And I got this version of it in Tokyo where Mick was saying, come on, John, get out of there. Everybody was sort of on my case, as they say, saying, how dare I not be doing it? You know, what's it got to do with Mick whether I'm not doing it? All the rock stars were commenting about what I was not doing. You know, I couldn't understand them. I thought, how square of him, you know, how dumb. He's going on about you hiding behind your kid, you know. He's trying to be nice about it. He wasn't attacking me, but it was sort of with a little edge to it. He said, I like John very much, but he's hiding behind Sean, and why doesn't he get his finger out? And Yoko's got him locked up. I know what's that like, what that is like. Don't kid me that you're doing it for the family because you can have both. Well, you know, he lived to learn that lesson because he didn't have both. Yes. Okay, and that was before he split with Bianca and the child and all that, and which I feel sorry for him about, the pain that one goes through separation and having a child involved. But I didn't feel as though I could have both, and it was more important to have a relationship with Yoko and with the child than to be seen.
And another thing that we noticed in the 60s when we were waving flags and sort of, or whatever, you know, and all these people who are trying to change society for the good and all that, they'll be running around, you know, sort of with flags and banners, but at the same time they forget their family and they have a split or, you know, divorce, and the children are ignored and the wives are resentful, and, you know, that sort of scene. So we felt that we just have to try to clean up our personal life as well, and sort of like really take care of each other, you know.
Well, even with the Jerry Rubins and the Tariq Alis and that, we'd always comment to them, and after they'd left, well, where's the women? You know, where's the women running Red Mall? Where's the women socialists? Where's the women left-wingers? Where's the women in on the meeting about how they're going to overthrow the government or whatever the hell they were talking about?
And Jerry's girlfriend typing his, you know, thesis or something, you know, or a speech,
you know,
or whatever.
They're going to liberate the world, but
Typical.
they're all doing the typing and making the coffee. You know, come on, this is garbage. But, you know, it took us time to sort of see through it all like that. You know?
Can we just go backwards just for a
Sure,
moment, because
sure.
there are about 3 things I want to deal with, and then we'll come back to the album and up to date again. I'm sorry about this, but
That's fine with us.
I didn't want to stop you because it's silly when it's flowing. October 1974, we've got to play Whatever Gets You Through a Night, which I think...
Elton, yeah.
Yeah, Elton, who I did a programme similar to this with not so very long ago, and we see quite a lot of in London when he's not worrying about the finances of his football club, which he does these days.
He's Watford, right?
Yes, he's been doing a good job there. Vocals, piano and organ. Had you known each other a long time? Because Elton would appear to have been around the business quite a while. I mean, when did you first meet the man?
I didn't meet him till he was big and famous. Let me think. You've got me here. I can't. I met him through Tony King, I think, who is a mutual friend. Tony had worked at Apple, but he'd also worked at Decca and all various places in London. Yeah. And he was a friend of that great DJ who was a friend of George. And God, it's gone out of my head now. He was always into R&B. It'll come later. And I think it was through Tony King somewhere in New York.
Mike Raven?
No, but I remember Mike. He was. Yeah. No, he had a beautiful wife who was like very dark, or maybe she was a different nationality. I'm not sure what, but they were friends of Joe. Anyway, he's very famous in the London scene. You'd know immediately. Right. I can't remember.
Corner, was it?
What?
Corner?
No, not Alex Corner. No, he was a radio guy, BBC guy.
Huh.
Or he worked
R&B.
Mike Raven?
No,
we've
not
had
the famous
we've had
Mike
Ray.
Raven with the beatnik beard. No.
Spot the DJ time, folks. Who was that
But he
R&B
also
freak?
he brought the Ronettes over, introduced the Beatles to the Ronettes in his flat in London, and he was hip to the Motown stuff very early. And all that, and he'll know who he is if he's listening. Anyway, it was Tony King, I think.
Yeah.
And how that record came about was that Elton was in town, and I was doing it. I needed the harmony. He did the harmony on that and a couple more, and played beautiful piano on it. And jokingly, he was telling me he was going to do this Madison Square Garden concert, and he said, "Will you do it with me if the record's #1?" And I did not expect it to get to #1 at all. I didn't think it had a chance in hell, because my, I wasn't being very well received on any level then, with the Kotexes and the hamburgers or whatever. And so I said, sure I will. Well, I lived to get nervous about that, because a year later, whenever it was, he came back and says, okay, it's time to pay your dues.
And the record went to #1.
Yeah, that was good. It was the first #1 I had, actually. Yes. Imagine that wasn't #1. Instant Karma wasn't #1, so I don't think are better records than whatever gets you through the night. Words are pretty good. But anyway, so what could we sing? That was the point. So we sang Paul's song, I Saw Her Standing There, so I'm on Elton's record. But it was quite nice, and that's when Yoko and I got back together, the night I performed with Elton at Madison Square Garden. And I went on there and did the number, and I was quite astonished that the crowd was so nice to me, because I was only judging by what papers said about me, and I thought I may as well not be around, And the crowd was fantastic.
No, let me explain that, because I was in the audience, and Elton came out and he performed, and this is the first time I saw Elton perform, and he's just a fantastic performer, the performer of the century. That's the way I felt that night he was. I mean, sort of very heavy and very good. I was watching, and everybody was applauding and all that. But then when John came out, and it was Madison Square Garden, was it, and just the whole sort of hall was shaking, because everybody was just jumping and applauding and screaming and shouting. It's an amazing scene, And really, literally, that floor was shaking.
The place is going.
I thought it was like an earthquake,
Yeah.
And so John came out like that, because it was a surprise to him and everything, I suppose. But anyway, he was standing there. And so I'm sure that people thought, well, this is great, But this John that I observed was a different John. I thought, oh, he looks so lonely, He looks so lonely out there.
So that's my man
and I
out
was
there.
sort of
I didn't know she was in the
feeling
audience.
choked,
I couldn't have gone on if I'd known she was there. I came off stage, and there she was, and we looked at each other. It was like the Indica Gallery scene again, and that's when we got back together that night. So it's a happy memory, that whole period.
It's a great story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, #9 Dream came up in February 1975 from the album, another much-played track in Great Britain, and I dare say here as well.
Yeah, it got to about #9, actually.
Yes, it did.
Actually, that was written by I wrote that. That's what I call craftsmanship writing, meaning, I just churned that out. I mean, I'm not putting it down, it's just what it is what it is. But I just sat down and wrote it, with no real inspiration, based on a dream I'd had. But I thought, I need a track. I wrote it round the string arrangement I'd written for Harry Nilsson album I'd produced of Many Rivers to Cross, the Jimmy Cliff, is it, number?
That's right.
And I'd done this string arrangement for that. And it was such a nice melody on the strings. I thought, this is a tune, So I just wrote words to the string arrangement. That was #9 Dream. Kind of psychedelic, dreamy kind of thing.
In March 1975, as you mentioned a little earlier, we'll probably edit it, you teamed up with David Bowie on Fame.
Yeah, because I was never in the London scene in the 60s, whereas George and Paul would be going around everybody's sessions all the time, and playing with everybody. I never played anywhere without the Beatles. I never jammed around with people at all.
Loyalty, or it just didn't interest you?
No, just shyness, insecurity, and I couldn't go in a session and play like George plays. I'm limited vocabulary on the guitar and the piano. So what could I do going in with Cream or whatever they were doing those days? So I never hung out in the clubs playing. I hung out in the discos boogieing and drinking and that, but I never did that bit. And then suddenly I was working with Elton, and then Bowie was around and we were talking and that, and he'd say, come down, and I found myself doing that, you know. So he's fiddling around. He writes them in the studio. You know, he goes in about 4 words and a few guys and starts laying down this stuff. And he has virtually nothing. He's making it up in the studio. So I just contributed whatever I contributed, you know, like backwards piano and a couple of things like repeat of Fame. And then we needed a middle 8, so we took some Stevie Wonder middle 8 and did it backwards, you know, and we made a record out of it, right? So he got his first #1, so I felt that was like a karmic thing, you know. Elton gave, with me and Elton, I got my first #1, so I passed it on to Bowie and he got his first. And I like that track, you know.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
It's a nice track.
Yeah, I love it.
Clever man. We mentioned earlier The Elephant Man, which we've been to see while we've been here in New York. I must say, a stunning performance from Bowie. He's a very talented gentleman.
Amazing guy, isn't he?
I mean, I was quite puzzled by that, because I wonder whether David starring in a stage play like that would encourage the wrong sort of people to turn up. The screamers might come to see Bowie and say, to hell with the intellectual element of the play, we're just here to clock him. And it wasn't like that at all, actually. It was a very sympathetic audience.
I must say I admire him for a vast repertoire of talent the guy has, you know. I was never around when the Ziggy Stardust thing came, because I'd already left England when all that was going on, so I didn't really know what he was. And meeting him doesn't give you much more of a clue, you know.
That's very true. That's very true.
Because you don't know which one you're talking to, you know. And you know, we all have our little personality traits, so between him and me, I don't know what was going down, but we seemed to have some kind of communication together, and I think he's great, the fact that he could just walk into that and do that. I could never do that.
You did Across the Universe on that album, didn't you?
I could never go and do it, an Elephant Man. Well, she's great. She tells me I can do everything. I can make a movie, you know, because you only have to learn 2 lines at once.
I'm not talking about specifically Elephant Man.
I can't even remember my own lyrics, so I couldn't go on stage and remember all that.
Do you remember doing Across the Universe with Bowie? You played guitar on that?
Did I play on that too?
I think you did.
Oh, yeah, my God, jeez, I did, yeah. I didn't remember that. No, I only remember the Fame session.
75, the rock and roll album, which was all oldies, which was a collaboration with Phil Spector.
Yeah.
A lot of die-hard fans of the old days in Britain would say, yeah, John Lennon's our king rocker.
Oh, that's nice.
How does John Lennon feel about that statement?
Well,
Three people said that to me before I left London.
Well,
friends of mine.
good on you. I knight you as the king of rock. I now call you Sir Whoever.
You did Bebopalula, Sweet Little 16, Peggy Sue.
Yeah, there's millions. I would do albums of that stuff, but I get slacked for, he can't write anymore, you know. I like to just go in.
Was that the case at the time, John?
There was a bit of that, you know, he's run dry, so he has to do these. I did them for the pure hell of it. And that was the first one where I gave Spector his head. Although it came to a different kind of head in the end. That's another long story. If you look at the album, there's about 5 of Spector's, and then there's 5 I knocked off in 5 days, which was Bebopalula and the Holly stuff and the Carla Thomas, Sam Cooke song and all that, because he ran away with the tapes. He called me. Yeah, he ran off with the 16 tracks and locked them in his garage or somewhere. I couldn't get him, and he called me one night. A very far out guy, you know. He calls me and said, he calls me, and we're in the middle of the session, but because I'd never got that close to him on the Imagine and the Plastic Ono things, because he'd been very good and just come and gone away again, and I hadn't really got to know him. On the rock and roll, it took me 3 weeks to convince him that I wasn't going to co-produce with him, and I wasn't going to go in the control room. I said, I just want to be a singer. You treat me like Ronnie. We'll pick the material. I just want to sing. I don't want anything to do with production or writing or creation. I just want to sing. So I finally convinced him. Anyway, long story short, one day when he didn't want to work one night, he called me and said, the studio's been burnt down. Now, the early days, I didn't know about him, you know. I didn't know how far away he was. So I said, the studio's burnt down. So anyway, a couple of hours passed. The studio's burnt down. So I get somebody to call. The studio hasn't been burnt down. That was the Sunday. The following Sunday he calls me and he says, on the phone, hey, Johnny. I said, there you are, Phil. What happened? We're supposed to be doing a session. I've got the John Dean tapes. I says, what? I've got the John Dean tapes.
Watergate.
Right, Watergate. I said, what are you doing? What are you talking about? He says, the house is surrounded by helicopters now. They're trying to get him. I said, the house is surrounded. I'm buying this garbage, you know. So I'm saying the house is surrounded. You got the John Dean tapes. I said, well, what about our session? Aren't we supposed to be finishing or something? You know, it's costing money. This. He said, I said, what do you do in the gym? I'm the only one that knows how to tell whether they've been doctored or edited or not. I said, well, what he was telling me in his own sweet way was he had my tapes. Not the John Dean Watergate tapes. He had my tapes locked in the cellar behind the barbed wire and the Afghan dogs and the machine guns. So there's no way you could get them. So that album was stopped in the middle for a year, and we had to sue through Capitol to get him back off him. By then it had been going on and on and on, and it was the Tampax Lost Weekend period as well, and it was all hell was going on. And I'd somehow got committed to producing Harry Nilsson's album, which that's when I sobered up in Harry Nilsson's album, because I took Keith Moon and Harry and all them, and I'd lost the John Dean tapes. I'd lost them, so that album was quit. I'd promised Harry in a drunken stupor I'd produce him. And suddenly, we rented this house. I thought, get them all in one house, and they'll behave themselves. So we got Keith Moon. It was the wrong thing to do. I had Keith Moon, Harry Nilsson, and Ringo. All these people living in a house on the beach, formerly where Kennedy and Marilyn had been, or something like that, on one of those LA houses on the beach. And one day I realized, Jesus, I'm the producer. They're going to be asking me where the tapes are. You know, and we'd go in, the bottle would be out, and everybody was just falling on the floor, and nobody was working. So I sobered up then. I just quit cold turkey, the drink. Finished off Harry's album. Harry doesn't know when to quit. He wants to go on and on and on, mixing. Every time you mix it, he wants to do it again. So I ran away to New York with the Harry tapes. I didn't steal them. I said, Harry, you got to leave me alone to finish this. I'm supposed to be producing it. He followed me to New York. I finally had to tell him, I say, Harry, get the hell out. I want to finish this record. And then suddenly they sent me we got the rock and roll tapes back from Spectre, finally, and I was in the middle of Walls and Bridges, and all hell was going on, and I finished off the rock and roll thing in 5 days. I did about 8 tracks, all in one after the other, because what I found is when I just sort of relaxed, all the words to Stand By Me, Be Bop, I knew them all from being 15. They all just came back like that, so it was simple. So I did that, but funnily enough, at the end of the rock and roll, on a track called Just Because, which Phil wanted me to sing, I didn't know it that well. You hear me saying, and so we say farewell from Record Plant West. And something flashed through my mind as I said it was, am I really saying farewell to the business? It wasn't conscious. And it was a long, long time before I did take time out.
Yes.
And I looked at the cover, which I'd chosen, which is a picture of me in Hamburg.
That's right.
First time we got there.
That's right.
And I thought, am I going... And the other famous picture that's around in all the Beatle books is a picture of me on stage with the group before Paul had joined. And I'm in a white jacket. It's in the Hunter Davis book and all of them. That was the first day I sang Bebopaloola at a church fete with a band called the Quarrymen. It was the day I met Paul, and he was in the audience. A mutual friend had brought him. So I thought, is this some kind of karmic thing? Here I am with this old picture of me in Hamburg from 61, and I'm saying farewell from Record Plant, and I'm ending as I started, singing this straight rock and roll stuff.
Very interesting analogy.
I had no conscious...
Very interesting analogy.
It was only years later when I looked back and thinking, was I saying that? Because that was really the last record I made, even though it came out at a different order from Walls and Bridges, I think. They came out backwards order because of what Phil had done with the John Dean tapes.
Interesting story.
Helicopters all around the building, John.
Then there was the Shaved Fish album, which was a collection of hit singles.
Well, hit and misses,
Yes.
I think, and nears. Well, what I realized, that was another thing. Was it a subconscious move? Did I know I wasn't going to be on Capital EMI anymore? I had no intention. I had no thoughts about it. But what I found out was when I went to look for the Cold Turkey master tapes, nobody knew where they were. I had to use dubs of Power to the People because the tapes had gone. Nobody gave a damn at the record companies because they weren't, that big enough for them to be interested. So what I realized, if I don't put this Shaved Fish together, that's why I didn't call it oldies but goldies or the best of, because it wasn't. Some of them didn't hardly get any airplay. But I thought, if I don't put this package together, some of the work's just going to go, and it'll be lost forever. So I put it together and sort of, at least it's there now for anybody who's interested.
On that subject, are you aware of the amount of Beatles product that has been reissued in various forms over the last few years? We've had an album of the Beatles ballads, we've had the Beatles doing rock and roll, we've almost had the Beatles doing things the Beatles didn't do.
Yes, I know. But some of them I was aware of because they would call about it, and I asked for George Martin to reproduce them. They wanted to do them in some way or other. I've forgotten what it was. That double package that they did. And I was involved in that respect about just checking the condition of them, because I didn't want lousy versions going out. I wanted them to be as was. And I asked Capital EMI or EMI Capital, whichever it is, please ask George Martin, would he take care of it so that at least he knows what to do with it. I didn't want some strange guy, you know, making dub versions of it and putting it out, because some of the versions that were going out, the reissues, were pretty poor. I hadn't even listened to them because I just presumed they'd take the tape as we made it and make a master and put it out again. But they didn't. They'd been screwing around with a few of the early ones. Yeah. And I didn't know that till it was too late. So on that last package where they had Beatles 60 different periods, that one, I made sure that George... The red and the blue, that one. I made sure George Martin was there. And I made sure they put that picture, which I got Linda to take of the four Beatles in the same pose as their very first album, over the Abbey Road, that EMI office in that other place, some square, I've forgotten. Manchester Square. So I was involved in that respect, in that package, making sure that the cover was what I wanted and that the sound was done by George Martin. So I don't mind that one.
And you checked the remix too.
Checked the remix after he'd done it, and it was as good as you could get out of it, whatever mono recording we did then.
Vocals right, everything else left, or Vicky Verky?
Yeah, that was surprised me. I don't know what we were doing then. I want to talk to George Martin about that. Why were we always putting the drums on the right and why wasn't it in the middle? I was surprised. I always thought in terms of mono, I wasn't that sold on stereo.
Almost made Kenny Everett an extra Beatle, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Did some wonderful editing jobs.
Well, Jack Douglas, who worked with us on this thing, Double Fantasy, and he worked with us on Fly, Approximate Mind Games, he goes way back. He was the young engineer those days.
He put the strings on Imagine.
Yeah. Well, he was saying that the way they learned how to reproduce Beatle music in studios and on stage was because of those extraordinary stereo things. They could isolate the vocals, the harmony, and learn that, and then isolate the other side and learn that, and that's what they were doing. But I don't know why the hell we did that. I have to ask George Martin, because a lot of it was done before I knew that the recording studio was really a big tape recorder. Then it was like spaceship. Looked like a spaceship to me.
We filled the gap.
We did.
1975, when you retired and went underground, for want of a better phrase, you said, I have made my contribution to society.
I didn't.
No,
this is the funny thing.
That.
You know how you're saying, well, were you laughing during the bed-ins and the bags and all that? It's funny that you're laughing about it. Of course we were laughing. We had fun. Also, the fun of when we weren't doing anything was all these amazing stories. They had in the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, that I'd gone bald. That was, they showed before and after pictures. You know, they used a picture of me with a berry on.
You shouldn't have played with
Elton
John. That's
yeah, right. So anyway, a couple of stories went around. One that I'd gone completely bald, and the other was that I'd made this extraordinary statement that I made. I mean, you can hear how I talk. Can you imagine me saying that? I've made my contribution to society, and what is it? What does it go next?
No, that pretty well was.
And
the
I
quote.
will no longer work again. There was the whole quote. I never said that because I didn't talk to any reporters or radio people
or anybody
for the 5 years that I was underground, as you call it. I didn't talk to anybody, so I never said that. I don't know where they got it from.
And we were way overground on the 7th floor, Dakota.
Yeah. we were high as kites, my dear. Underground. That was the Newsweek. You see how the media self-perpetuates itself? Now, the first interview we did after the 5 years, we chose to do through Newsweek, for whatever reasons.
I've read it. Yes.
Right, okay. So they ask us the questions, she goes back, the editor rephrases the questions. And when she sat down with me with a little tape recorder and said, what were you doing, what made you withdraw from the public for 5 years, was how she put it. When she gets back there, the editor says, underground, you know why? I've worked out the psychology, because Abby Hoffman had just come out from the underground, so they tie Hoffman, Lennon, why were you underground? I wasn't underground, I was overground. I was all over the place, like I said, all over the world, travelling, and we were doing all kinds of business, and you might have heard cows and all that sort of stuff. I mean, we were pretty damn active, we just weren't in the papers, we weren't available for comment, that's all.
Did you say something to the extent, but life doesn't end when you cut off your subscription to Billboard?
Right, because I literally cut off I did say that, but I said that after. I mean, the quotes are correct in Newsweek. It's just that the questions was rephrased. Yeah. So let's not perpetuate that underground. There's no underground about it. It was not underground at all.
We had a good time.
Yeah, we were having a fine old time. It's just that we were making no comment. When Elvis died, people were harassing me in Tokyo for a comment. Well, I'll give it you now. He died when he went in the army. So, you know, that's when they killed him. That's when they castrated him. So the rest of it was just a living death.
You've said that you reversed roles, that John
Yes, my dear.
looked after looked after Sean. How good a cook are you, John?
Not bad, not great. I mastered the art of rice. They say anyone can cook rice, but few can cook it well. I can cook it reasonably well. I can do fish.
You're a good bread maker.
I've learned to make bread, which I was thrilled with. I took a Polaroid of my first bread, you know. There's these two I couldn't believe they came out like that. Because
in a good old macho tradition, I mean, you had to record it in history, you know what
I
I mean?
was thrilled, you know. It's not macho. Anybody would. It was the first bread. It looked great, you know, and it tasted good. And I was pretty damn good at it. And so for about half a year, I was providing the food for Yoko, the baby. Even the staff was eating. I was so excited that I could do it, that I would bring all the staff in to eat lunch, you know. But after a bit, it was wearing me out. I was thinking, geez, because life becomes, as most housewives know,
routine.
A routine of between the meals, you see. So people saying, well, weren't you thinking about this, that, and the other? You don't, because you think from breakfast. Once the baby's had the breakfast, they've had the breakfast. You've got about an hour. You know, well, before breakfast starts, you've got a little time to yourself, a coffee and a smoke or whatever, and then everybody comes out, wants to eat. Okay, feed them. You don't get a gold record. They just swallow it, you know. If they swallow it, that means you were a hit. If they don't swallow it, it means you did something wrong, you know. So
but
then you're thinking, what wrong? What? Yeah, that's how I really feminized in a different way. And it was quite an experience. It was equivalent to, say, going to a monastery and withdrawing in that way, but not withdrawing to going to a Zen monastery or going to India to meditate or going to Scotland and talking to melons or something, whatever they're doing up there in that place, famous place that's supposed to grow big veg or something. So in that way, it was a withdrawal by becoming, it was a Zen experience to master that cooking thing and put as much energy into that bread and make it right, quickly. You know, not just whack it away. I took it from scratch, none of that buy a packet of Pillsbury or something and just it blows up into bread. From scratch with the flour and the doing by hand. And then the time between breakfast and lunch is very quick. You hardly have time to read the paper. That's presuming it ain't raining and the babysitter can take the child out, so you get a break from the constant, Daddy, look at this, Daddy, look at that, look at me, look at me, look at me. Feed the cats. Then it's bloody lunchtime, you know. So this went on for about 9 months. I really enjoyed it, you know, and because I put my mind to it. But then the meals is what you live. You live a regulation of between meals. And on the other side of me, that had always just been served by women, or whether it was my Auntie Mimi, God bless you, wherever you are, how are you, dear? And or whoever, served by females, wives, girlfriends, who you just sort of flop in drunk and expect some girlfriend at college to make the breakfast the next morning, even though she'd been drunk as a dog too with you at the party. The female was supposed to suddenly to get on the other side of the counter. It was quite an experience, and I appreciated what women had done for me all my life that I never even thought about it.
And women's work is never done, you know.
Oh, it's so true, love. It's so true. It's never ever done, you know.
And, you know, he makes this
And then
bread,
there's the dishes, that bloody machine.
If you make bread, you know, you want people to eat it, you know. And if they don't eat, it's a personal insult. So he went through that one. Well, Yoko, aren't you eating this? You know, I made it,
you didn't like the bread, Yoko.
No, it's just that I'm not hungry,
well, the mother's always hanging around saying, eat up, clean up your plate, because she's put all the sweat into it, and then the kid comes and says, I don't like sausage.
Did you become a dictatorial mother, and did you not appreciate...
No.
No, he wasn't, but he was going through the experience with a, you know, sort of tongue-in-cheek way, and
they love the bread. I make it 2 on Friday. It's supposed to last a week. It'd be gone Saturday afternoon, you know, boof, like pigs, woomph, it gone. So I started buying the bread again pretty damn quick.
Well, if you don't eat it, you're offended. If we eat it up, then you think, well, I mean, I have to make it again. You know, it's that one.
But I enjoyed it, and I looked on it as a discipline, an absolute discipline. And that's how I approached it. And through that, I got into a whole another world.
And one of the most important facets of that world, surely, was that it gave you a great deal of time to spend with your son, Sean.
Yeah, because between Yoko and I cannot do figures and numbers. I'm not good at business. And somebody had to take the business, care of business, whether it was Beetle apples or surviving inflation or whatever you call it. And there's no way I can do it. I don't have that talent. So she had to do it. She has the talent to do it, you know. And so I had to contribute something, not just sit around either talking about the former greatness of the Beatles or the fact that, well, I'm not writing a song, so what am I supposed to do? So I had the sort of sibling or the early relationship with Sean, because she would go to the office, even though the office was only downstairs in the same building, she was still not there. And so Sean and I would spend this time together. And it was fantastic, because as I said in some interview, with Julian, my first child, I was just toured the world. I would come home and there'd be a 12-year-old boy there who I had no relationship whatsoever. Now he's 17. I'm getting a relationship now because I can talk and about music and whatever he's into and girlfriends and that kind of stuff, you know, but I don't. It was a strange child in the house. I'd come back from Australia and he'd be a different size. I wouldn't even recognise the way he looked half the time.
Yeah.
I didn't want that to be like that with Sean. And the timing was just right for me to do all that as well. And it's great, the jokes. They did a thing on Saturday Night Live, you know, they had me in an apron and Yoko was with a tie and all that, you know, and they did a real good skit on us and we were hysterical, you know. I mean, it was just very, very funny. All the time I kept getting on and saying, oh, look, the oven's burning, you know, and that was the skit of me. But, you know, I don't mind Mickey taking at all, because to me, I approached it intellectually at first as a kind of Zen discipline: make the bread, conquer the rice, conquer that dependence on woman. Even if I'm alone, I can now cook.
So
enough to get by.
Thing. I mean, most men probably resent the fact that they have to depend on women on those things, you know.
They like their independence. They like to be able to go in the kitchen and cook.
When you think about it, at school, I wish they'd taught us practical things. I
They
wish
don't,
I
do
could been taught to type, so as I could write quickly, right? Which I've self-taught myself, but it's still not fast enough, right? I wish I'd been taught to cook, so as I could look after myself when my auntie was not there or something. I know you were there most of the time, but sometimes you weren't there, because she'll immediately get back to me in a letter, you know. I know you were there like 99%, but whenever, you know, and when I was a bit older and coming in at odd times or getting in a flat when I was at college, suddenly there's this tin of beans, you know, or living on fish and chips. And if you just taught to cook, type, and a few practical things, and to drive, instead of all this garbage about whatever they were trying to teach us at school.
Carpentry and metalwork usually, isn't it?
You know, and the spinning jenny, you know, who gives a damn about the spinning jenny, you know?
What's that?
Oh, it's some invention.
Long story,
I remember,
right?
you know, on 1492, Columbus, yeah, Jesus.
Well, as I sit here talking to you, you look two very happy people. Which of you, or was it both of you, first got in contact with David Geffen, presuming that you made the contact?
Oh, well,
He
yes,
made
I
the
did.
contact, didn't
Oh, well,
he?
yes, he did first.
She did the
And
business.
then
She did the deal.
I just called him back,
And from that telephone call, or whatever it was,
and we decided to meet. And so he came to my office. Oh, yes. He came to my office, and sort of I was checking him, you know. I thought it would be all right, you know.
You see, the point being about me cooking and her doing the business was, before we'd always had somebody come in to look after the business, and you know the story of that. It's all, you know,
history.
Some lawyer or some accountant would come in and say, I'll handle it all for you. Since 1962 they've been handling it and had nothing but tax problems and, you know, whatever, you know, for a long history of it. Like, we don't own any of the Beatles songs, we don't own any of the Beatles records, we got farthings for royalties and all the rest of it.
When you sold your 25% share in Apple?
No, not yet.
Is it on the way?
Well,
No.
anyway,
Now
the
we're
point being
too
that
busy with
we
other
decided
things.
not to have an outside party, so
Right,
therefore we
right.
had to look after our own stuff and face that reality. She could deal with it, so I dealt with the other side, which I could deal with. I'm a homebody. I always like to hang around the house.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are many men who feel that way, you know, about the fact that they really would like to be at home secretively, you know, or maybe just cook, you know. A lot of men are very good cook, you know, and they like to exercise that talent, but then it's supposed to be something sissy and they're not supposed to do. There's that. And also it was mentally healthy for us to just sort of exchange roles in a way, to see the other side, you know, that sort of thing.
So along came Mr. Geffen and you made the decision to record the album Double Fantasy. which we've been hearing a lot of recently. You also told me, John, that there were in fact, 22 tracks originally? You've included 14, and a little while ago I was hearing something which isn't on the album, which was very interesting indeed.
We recorded the album before we talked to Geffen.
Right, exactly.
You know, we decided to make it first and then answer all the letters and inquiries that came, you know, wanting to have the album. You know, like we eliminated the ones that said, can we hear it first? Okay, you can go to hell, you know, forget about him, you know.
Yeah,
if you don't trust it, you can't trust after all those years, forget it, I don't want to know about it. Also, he wasn't a big company, so he weren't dealing with this anonymous grey suit, you know, with the president changing every 2 days. I mean, there was more presidents of Capitol and EMI. They were always waiting for the Beatles to die. They died first every time, you know. They always treated each record as the last record, you know.
In the stage of negotiation, did the old fear come back from the old days that you were having to take a step which involved somebody else?
I did. I was terrified. I was saying, can't we put it out without putting it out? You know, couldn't we do something else? Do I have to put my name on the paper? Because I've only, you know, for the last 5 years, the first time I didn't owe somebody songs or records for the last 15 or 20 years. Since 1962, I was signed up to some body or other, and thankful to be in 1962. But what you sign when you're 21, and it goes on for 20 years, and they own your life and soul, and you can never get out of it. So I like the 5 years when all contracts were free. I was free of any contractual obligation. When she finally says, well, you know, you're going to have to sign something to say that they have the right to put the record out. I was saying, are you sure? Are you sure? Why don't you sign it? You know, you put your name on it. I'll go out, you know, I don't want to put my name on it. But we made arrangements which didn't make me feel paranoid, because I don't want to owe people nothing. You know? I don't want to... The point of being a musician or an artist, to me, was the freedom.
How easy was it to get musicians together?
Easy. They were panting at the doors, man. They all couldn't wait to get in, you know. I mean, all the ones I used to work with were sending messages, and I felt bad, but I didn't want to go back in the same bag, you know. I heard from Jesse Ed Davis and Klaus and all them, but I wanted to start really brand new.
And we were very lucky.
The only guy I knew was Hugh McCracken, who'd worked on Christmas Song, the one you mentioned, and maybe a couple more tracks.
And you got Andy Newmark on drums.
Yeah, who toured with George.
Somebody you'd known for a fair while, I presume.
No, I might have met him backstage when George did some concert, not in New York, across the water. I never remember the Trent or New Jersey, somewhere. And I probably met him backstage. I don't remember him at all. And Tony Levine, the bass player, fantastic. I didn't even know he existed. He's famous, but I didn't know he'd worked with all sorts of people. So, you know, the only guy I knew was Hugh McCracken. I'd used him. He was a New York guy.
Now, there are 14 songs.
Earl Slick, who'd worked...
Right.
Earl Slick was Bowie's when Bowie was in his R&B incarnation at that period, mid-70s. Earl Slick had been his guitarist, but I hadn't met him, even though he was on the Fame album. Yeah. We were not in the studio at the same time.
And you recorded it where we're sat at this very moment, in the Hit Factory.
We are sitting in this is the very room, the very room where it happened. You know, the double fantasy was brought alive, as it were, in this very bloody room, wasn't it, dear? Yes, exactly.
Dear. You're wasted, Mr. Lennon, you're wasted.
I love Fawlty Towers. I'd like to be in that, you know.
Would you?
I mean, part of me would sooner have been a comedian, you know. I just don't have the guts to stand up and do it, but I'd love to be in the Monty Python.
Yeah.
You know, rather than the Beatles,
that's the thing
in a
that
way.
Saved us, you know, the fact that he's
yeah.
funny, you know, and he says I'm funny, so, you know, we
peculiar.
both make each other laugh in a way, you know.
Fawlty Towers is the greatest show I've seen in years. They have it over here now. God, it's great. I mean, what a guy, he's great. And I saw him explaining how he only gets half an hour to do it and produce it once a week, but what a masterpiece, what a beautiful thing.
And we now have a new one called Not the 9 o'clock News, which runs on a Monday night while the 9 o'clock News is running on BBC One. Not the 9 o'clock News.
Well, it'll come up. The public TV here buys them all, you see. We get all the Masterpiece series stuff. We've cried our way through, what is it, Lydia?
Oh,
and,
yes.
Everything, all those series, we watch them all. It's beautiful stuff, you know. And I see all the English countryside, you see, and then I think, well, it saves getting on the plane, you know. I mean, there it is, all green and wet, and it looks beautiful, you know, and it's voyeurism. It's sort of being in England without being there. You know?
So you recorded the album before the deal came up, and the album was released. Let's talk about the single, Just Like Starting Over. Was that an obvious choice to the both of you as a single? Were you happy with that?
Yeah, because it was...
It's the message.
It was
you know.
really called Starting Over, but while we were making it, people kept putting things out with the same title. You know, there was a country and western hit called Starting Over, so I added Just Like at the last minute. The thing was, it was obvious because it was the one where the musicians got very loose because it was so simple rock and roll. There was no problem. You know, they really relaxed, and they'd all be like that after it. And it just, even though I don't think it's the strongest track, perhaps, but it was I think some of the other tracks are stronger, like Losing You. Might be a stronger piece of material. But Starting Over was the best way to start over. And to me, it was like going back to 15 and singing a la Presley. All the time I was referring it to John, the engineer's here in the room with us. I was referring to it as Elvis Orbison. It's kind of, I want you, I need only the lonely, you know. Like that. It's a kind of parody, but not really a parody.
A little tongue-in-cheek?
A little.
Very.
When I was doing it, I was cracking up. Oh, it's been so long since I took a, you know, doing that.
You relieved me greatly because we still do Roundtable, the review show on Radio 1, and I was one of the guests the night that the Lennon single arrived in the studio, and there was absolute panic and pandemonium, and it was on the turntable, and the man who hosts the show now, Adrian Love, said to me, "What do you think?" I said, "I think terrific, but a little tongue-in-cheek."
Right, you're right. Well,
exactly.
That's a relief.
Some people took it serious, you know, saying, "What's he trying to do?" and all that, but, you know, they forget.
Well, he was winking, you know.
I've had tongue-in-cheek all along. I'm the Walrus. All of them had tongue-in-cheek. You know, I don't... just because other people see depths of whatever in it, you know, what does it really mean? I am the Eggman, you know. It could have been the pudding basin for all I care. Just tongue-in-cheek. It's not that serious.
Do you and did you get fed up with people ostracizing your lyrics and trying to read marvellously intellectual interpretations into them? Both of you, this must apply to.
It was fun. Sometimes it's fun, but then it gets to be stupid, you know. That's why I started from the Mother album onwards, trying to shave off all imagery, pretensions of poetry, illusions of grandeur. I call a la Dylan-esque, you know. I didn't want any of that. Just say what it is, simple English, make it rhyme and put a backbeat on it and express yourself as simply, as straightforwardly as possible. As they say, northern people are blunt, right? So I'm trying to write like I am.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the poetic side, and I'll probably do a little dabble later because Yoko's lyrics are so poetic. I get, well, maybe I should do some of that, you know. So, and the track you were talking about, the Walking on Thin Ice, was one of the extra tracks. We cut 22 tracks in 10 days. I mean, we were just like had diarrhea of rock here, you know. And we just zapped out these 22 tracks and got it down to 14. And one I played you before was Walking on Thin Ice, which was one of Yoko's tracks that we didn't put on for many, many reasons. Some were selected. And
which is a marvellous dance track, I must hastily add.
Well, then, because Kiss, 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 which is the other side of Starting Over, is getting a lot of rock club, new wave, whatever you call it, disco exposure. So we made a special kind of disc for them, and Yoko came up with the idea, why don't we give them something they don't have? And we made a kind of disco-esque, long 6-minute version of Walking on Thin Ice, which will go out as a separate market disco or rock club, and it'll go out to them.
And we throw in Open Your Box, which is the one that was banned, you know.
So we're going to throw in Open Your Box for old time's sake.
Tell me about Kiss, 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 Yoko.
What about?
About the song.
Oh, well...
Tell him how you recorded it in the pitch dark, hidden behind these big walls here.
Yes, well, you know, Kiss, 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 when recording time... I started to do it, and then I suddenly looked, and all these engineers were all looking, you know, and I thought, oh, I can't do that, you know. So I said, well, turn off all the lights and put the screen, and so that they put the screen around me. And I did it that way. You know?
We were all sitting there, and we were saying, "What's she doing?" You know, we could hear, you know, she was having an orgasm, and nobody was there. And I was saying, "Well,
it's called acting, my dear."
Oh, very good, dear, very good. Yes, Ziggy Stardust.
Do you get embarrassed in studio, Yoko, doing something like that? Do you want to be on your own and a bit shrouded
we were all,
so you can express
sorry to interrupt, but there was John, me, and Jack, and Lee, the engineer, and a few people. We're all, you know, in there, and she's
I'm glad I didn't know that.
She's trying to do, you know, what is it? I got that image of that Japanese movie running through the grass, you know.
Yes. It's a bit that, isn't it?
Go on, you better answer the question.
Well, I mean, I don't understand your questions. I mean, it's Kiss, Kiss, Kiss is what it is, and the song itself will explain. And so if you listen to it, you will get all whatever you want to get out of it, probably. But it's sort of mainly sort of like a feminine energy and vulnerability that women are not getting scared of exposing now, And it's all right to show vulnerability. And in a way, it's like saying, well, this is woman,
Well, she was a bit shy, and she put up a big screen, put the lights out, and we all just heard this
But
coming through.
In what you've just said, the most interesting statement to me is that you, the person listening, will derive what they wish out of it. Do you deliberately go to produce songs like that? Because it's rather like the movie business, isn't it? You can go and see an adaptation of something, and it sticks in your mind as being the adaptation that you might remember for the whole of your life. If you write a song and people can derive what they want from it, it's a very personal thing, isn't it? And that's a special way of communicating.
Oh, yes, well, I think that most of my songs, I can't help doing it, so I'm not saying that I do it intentionally, but sort of I have these visions and visual things, and that comes out. So that it's a visual almost, so that you can interpret the vision in any way you like, in a way.
Do you feel now at this stage, here we are in December 1980, that the team and the ease of writing is now back with you? And,
yes.
that you're going to be extremely prolific in the months and years to come?
Yes, I think it's going to be... At one period, they'd say, those two would do anything for publicity, for Christ's sake, get them off the front page, get them out there. People were bitching at us because we were always doing something, and then they were bitching at us because we weren't doing anything. And I have a funny feeling that it's going to be the other way around again, because we're talking and talking and talking, and there's all sorts of plans and ideas we have in our head. It's just a matter of getting it done, We already got half the next album, and we'll probably go in just after Christmas and do that. And we're already talking about what the idea for the third album is already laid out, and I can't wait, So it's a matter of just getting it done. And I'm sorry about you people that get fed up of hearing about us, but, we like to do it, so it's too bad.
Yeah. The problem is, of course, there's always the time gap between you finishing the recording and people like myself being allowed to sit and talk to you. And that always worries me somewhat, because it's past history to you, and as you've just said a moment ago, you're 2 albums ahead of me as we sit here now.
Right, we're already on the third in our minds, but the second physically, as it were, beginning to think about it. But it is, you can't do it at the same time, you see. You can't be discussing it while you're making it, or you don't even know what you're doing. You're kind of making it, and you're so into it, you cannot be objective about it. I couldn't, even some of the records I made, when you talk about them, I don't really, at the time, I wasn't consciously knowing what you're doing in a way. And it's only when you look back at it, I see what I was feeling at that time. Even though one tries to express it in the music, you're not conscious of what you're expressing. And it's sometimes about 2 or 3 years later when I realize what we made then. So Double Fantasy, I can talk all night about it, but it'll be 2 years before I can see it really, what it is. But how can we talk to you and make it at the same time? It's impossible. It's like inviting you to the rehearsal of a play, and then
changing it the night afterwards.
Right. Even the opening night, it can change the night after, right? So it's too bad. Too bad, isn't it?
A series of tremendous luck, tremendous amount of luck, probably made us finish that album in a way. I mean, the fact that it's men and women, and the fact that we were able to work together, the fact that the songs came to us at the same time almost, as a dialogue, etc. I mean, these are just sheer luck in a way. I mean, it's been given to us almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And the fact
amazing
that we can work together and express it in many different ways, from starting over to Kiss, Kiss, Kiss. And the difference is obvious in the sound and everything, but that we can both be part of both.
Andy, can we link to a few more tracks?
Yes,
I
want to do that.
Just get them to introduce them, right?
Beautiful Boy, John, a song about Sean.
Yeah. Well, Stevie Wonder wrote about his kid, right, didn't he?
Isn't she lovely? That was recorded here, wasn't it? He did songs in the key of life in this studio,
yes,
I think I'm right in saying.
in Hit Factory, New York, yeah. down in very near Times Square, folks. You come out of here after a session and there's strange women standing on the street. You know, I mean, it's really cooking, you know, it never stops.
Yeah.
And, so at first, funnily enough, for the time I was with Sean in the kitchen with the bread and you know, all that, I kept thinking, well, I ought to be inspired to write about Sean. I mean, I ought to. And I was going through a bit of that. And when I finally gave up on thinking about writing a song about him, of course, the song came to me when he was 4, 4.5, or 5. It was just coming up to October when I suddenly got the song about him.
Is he developing an interest in music?
Oh, he's very musical. Absolutely. Because I noticed something in the hospital. This is, maybe you don't need this, but when the black nurses come in, they'd put on WBLS, which is the R&B disco station. When the white nurses had come in, they'd put in on the country western station. But when the black nurses fed the babies, they picked them up and held them on their hip and danced around the room and the bottle. When the white nurses came in, they'd just sit still and jam the bottle down its throat and not move. So I thought, I want him to have natural rhythm, you know. I mean, seriously, I noticed the different attitude. Not only was it warmer and more contact, but there was constant movement. And officially, they weren't allowed to put the radio on. It was not. But when the head nurse was away, they put it on all the time because people don't want their children not being able to sleep without music. Long story short, which I didn't, I did the same with Sean until he could walk. Whenever I fed him, I put the rock and roll on or the R&B, and I danced with him. He can dance like nothing on earth. He's perfect pitch and key. He's into hound dog now because I said that in an interview, so he thinks it's about hunting, and bebop Lurie knows backwards.
Frankie Crocker is good for your kids.
Oh, Frankie Crocker.
WBLS will love you for that.
WBLS.
Beautiful Boys written by John, and Beautiful Boys is written by Yoko.
Yes.
One letter.
One letter.
I just wanted
two
to
titles.
be creative, you know, unique, you know. So I put S on.
Yeah.
Well, she's singing about boys and men, right?
Yes, well, what about it? Of course, it's a message to John and Sean and all men. Well, I think the lyrics will speak for itself in a way.
I'm very pleased that you've actually put your lyrics on the inner sleeve, because one of my major moans in the business over the last few years has been that the amount of information available on album sleeves has deteriorated in some cases to absolutely nothing.
You mean they've stopped printing the lyrics?
Oh yes, and they've stopped telling you who's playing on the album, and they've pretty well stopped telling you everything. I wouldn't say that for all record companies, but certainly far too many.
Must be financial, right?
It could be.
I mean, what other reason? They just don't want to spend the money on the print. You know, I'd sooner have the lyrics and no cover.
But it's not much money, I don't think, to print.
Oh, it is.
Is it?
Every penny counts, look.
I understand.
John, can we talk about I'm Losing You, which I think reflected your times alone in Hong Kong? Was that when you wrote that song?
Well, it wasn't Hong Kong so much as... it was actually in Bermuda. I called her, you know, and I couldn't get through. Can you imagine it? To the office, she was...
Because I was so busy.
She was so many calls, and I couldn't... I got really mad, you know. And I wrote this song in the heat of passion, as it were, and which is great for songwriting.
Or anger, shall we say?
But getting a bit distant from it, it is expressing the losing you of the 18-month lost. It was everything: losing one's mother, losing one's everything, losing everything you've ever lost is in that song. That's losing whatever. But sparked by the fact that I couldn't get through on the damn phone. You know? Can't even get you on the telephone.
And Woman, which is, I must say, a great favourite of mine.
Oh, thank you. I like that one, although I'm sort of embarrassed because it's, you know, sort of sounds a bit like Girl and a bit Beatley and a bit, you know, but I do like it
Why
myself.
does that embarrass you?
Because I'm still a bit feeling I'm supposed to be macho Butch Cassidy or something, and tough Lennon with a leather jacket and swearing and all that, and I really am just as romantic as the next guy, you know, and always was. It's the sort of 80s version of Girl to me, you know. I referred to the other ones, Elvis Orbison, this one I called the Beatle track all the time. I said, oh, the Beatle track, let's do the Beatle track tonight. But to me, it suddenly dawned on me about the woman thing. I was in Bermuda again, and it suddenly sort of hit me about what women represent to us, not as the sex object or the mother, but just their contribution. That's why you hear me muttering at the beginning for the other half of the sky, which is Chairman Mao's famous statement. that it is the other half. You know, all this thing about man, woman is a joke, you know. I mean, without each other, there ain't nothing, you know. So it was like this sort of, my God, you know, it was a different viewpoint of what I'd felt about women, and I can't express it better than I said in the song. And it's for Yoko, but it's to all women.
John Peel, who we mentioned earlier.
Ah, John. I bet he's got no hair now. It was pretty thin then.
He's losing it. I want to talk to you very briefly about what has been going on back home while you've been here for 5 years. And ask you firstly for your views on the new wave music that you must have heard, because you were telling me before we started recording and chatting that there are a couple of stations in New York which have actually gone out on a limb and played some pretty fiery music, shall we say.
Yeah, they have started playing it, but that's only been with the last few months.
Let me give you the quote from John. He said to me before I left London, tell John Lennon from me that I would be very interested to know if he had stayed in England, would he have championed the new wave cause?
Oh yeah, I'm a champion of it now. I like it. You know, I mean, look, when they catch up to the Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band, then let him ask me that question again. They haven't reached that yet.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the answer to that. And anybody who thinks, oh, well, dumb old Lennon just got stuck in the 60s to do Starting Over and Losing You, you think I don't know what she's doing? You think we went with Cold Turkey and Don't Worry Kyoko and Why and Open Your Box? You hear it all there. I'm aware of the B-52s and Madness. Don't do that. Do this. I think that is the most original thing, actually, because it's so peculiar.
Yeah.
You know, I think out of all that mob, that was one of the most original sounds. Very good drumming, very good bass and all that. Now, as I said, I was listening to classical music and not really following it. I saw Sid Vicious die and all that on video in New York because they were all coming over here to make it in the Big Apple, as they called it. So whoever came through, I could see him on this cable TV thing they have here. So I saw Blondie when she was unknown on the cable TV. I saw Vicious when he was living in the hotel being filmed and doing all that stuff, whenever that was, mid-70s.
How much of the Pistols' music have you heard?
Only whatever they did a video of it. You know, there was a lot of videos of them down at Max's or wherever the hell they were hanging out and playing, and Johnny Rotten and all that stuff. And yeah, great. To me, initially on Impact, seeing all that, I thought, oh, that's how we used to behave at the Cavern before Brian told us to stop throwing up and sleeping on stage and swearing. You know, I mean, like in Hamburg, I used to sleep on stage. We used to eat on stage. We used to swear on stage. We were absolutely au natural. So, but nowadays they don't have to put a shine holder on it to get a record contract, even though they are having a hard time with it. But still, yeah, I think it's great. I absolutely do. And when I was in Bermuda, a guy that works with me, Fred Seaman, had turned me on to the B-52s, Lenny Lovitch, or whatever her name is.
Lena Lovitch, yes.
Yeah, Madness, about 2 years ago, but then I wouldn't listen. I'd asked him to go out and make me some reggae records and put it on a cassette, and on the other side he put all that stuff, B-52s and all that, about 2 or 3 years ago, whenever they came out. And I wiped it out, didn't even bother listening to it. I wasn't interested in anything other than what I was doing. But in Bermuda, I said, Fred, what was all that stuff you give me? Go and get me it again. And he brought me Madness, B-52s, Pretenders. And I said, oh, this is great. He said, well, I played it. I gave it you 2 years ago. Why didn't you listen? I said, I didn't want to listen then. And now I want to hear what's going on. Yeah. So I dig it.
And you dig reggae too, because you were saying that there are some stations here that actually play dub reggae.
Oh, they play dub. They had, in the last 10 years, the thing I missed most about England was reggae. And in the last 10 years, a lot of Caribbean people have come here from Haiti, from Jamaica, and all points down there, and they've created a whole community and a whole thing, and it's getting very hip, the reggae, different from England's reggae. There's more R&B in it over here. Down in Brooklyn, they're making it. And it's very interesting. They play the English reggae and the New York reggae and the island reggae. There's all different styles. And the dub reggae, even the DJs are on echo. Well, man, you come to on the echo. But listen to Paper Shoes, Yoko Ono, second album. For the echo, for the dub. Okay? So, for anybody who thinks we ain't hip, you know, when you catch up, then we can talk about it.
I mean, we've done it all, really, you know.
We've been there and back, honey.
And that's
I still
10
like
years ago,
to do
you know.
straight rock and roll. I still, Losing You is a straight blues. Forget about the lyrics. I could be singing My Mommy Done Gone. It's blues, straight. Starting Over is straight pop rock, 50s style.
What about the American music scene at the present moment? I found it a bit soft listening to the radio here, particularly the rock stations.
Each... they've gone top 10 FM was really, they played albums, but the financial and all the things that get involved, things can never be always the same. So they're going through a change now because the WNEW and WPLJ, the big white rock stations here, and they have started introducing a lot of what you call new wave. But before they did it, a new wave station opened, which just plays nothing but the clickety 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 click, you know, whatever they call it, all the time. And of course, New York being what it is, they know what's going on in London because people are coming back and going back and forth all the time. So it was in the air all the time. It was being played in clubs. It was talked about like underground. You know, everything starts down there. And as soon as they make a hit record, whoever it is, everybody's going to say, this old out, and somebody else will come with a blue nose and a green ass, you know, and that would be the new thing. So it has to move up and diffuse and become part of the scene. I did a TV show in 1973 with a guy called Tom Snyder, and he said, what music do you like? I said, disco and reggae. I should have invested in reggae because I never thought the Americans would get on. The Beatles made an attempt at ska. The solo on I Call Your Name was ska, deliberate and conscious, right.
Yes.
That's nice.
Oobla Dee was semi.
Yeah.
Okay? So, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But I'm willing to learn anything. I dig it. I do enjoy it. I enjoy the best of it. I was in Bermuda in a disco. Okay, I finally went out one night to a disco. I haven't been to a disco since the ad-lib days in London. Ooh. Okay? And people were trying to get me to all these ones in New York. I just didn't want to know. They said, but it's different. I said, what, you mean more lights? You know, what the hell do I need to
less lights.
sit there in the dark looking at all these weirdos, you know? I've got enough in my head. But I finally went with Fred, this guy that works with me, when we were separate. Not separate for any real reason, just a holiday. And I went there, and upstairs they were playing the disco, and downstairs I walked in, they're playing Rock Lobster. And I sort of said to myself, Jesus, get the axe out and call Mother. She's finally made it. She mightn't be her doing it, but they're doing her to a T. I mean, they studied her. Yeah. They admit it too. So I called her on the phone and said, you won't believe this. I said, there's a group called B-52s. I'd heard their name for years and years whenever they'd been around, but I never really listened. I said, there's somebody doing your act there. She won't listen to anything, you know. She's absolutely self-contained. You know, I sat her down and she said, listen to it. I said, they're ready for you this time, kid. She said, well, I'm not going to do the same old stuff again. I said, do what you want.
Because I did it 10 years ago.
I said, do what you want, but do it. So here we are, and we're doing it.
No, but you see, when Jack Douglas, I called him because, you know, he was assisting with all the albums that we made here. And he was very good. And when I called him, well, of course, when we decided to call him, I found out that in the 5 years that we were absent, that he became a very famous producer, whatever. He said, you know, so, all right, so we co-produced with him. And so when he came, he said, well, all these young people are following you, you know. So that sounds sort of silly, you know. Maybe he's just sort of...
BSing you.
Yeah, right. So, and he said, no, really, you know, all these people are doing it. And I just still can't believe it. It's happening. I can see that. So, but this time, so Jack was saying, well, you know, just show him what old wave can do, you know, that one. But I didn't intend to do it that way. That's why I understand what John means. John just sort of did things that he wanted to do and what he would enjoy, you know, in this album.
See, we could have come back and tried to be freakier than the freaks.
We can
make
do
a
that.
conscious effort.
Yes,
because we were freakier 10 years ago than these people.
We could have just come back and reissued the early stuff of Yoko's that never really got much airplay anyway. Maybe John Peel and you, or maybe a couple of people heard in London, right? A couple of people over here. But we didn't want to. We wanted to do what we want to do, the same as we did then when we did whatever we were doing then.
And you're obviously two very satisfied people on the strength of it.
Yeah, we like doing it. That's the point, isn't it?
In other words,
I'm calling you.
One final question to you. What about your private life and your own sense of security these days? David Bowie, I think, has recently said, but the great thing about New York is that he can walk down the street and people, instead of rushing up and ripping his clothes off, will come out, or rather just walk past him and say, hi, David, how are you? And he can say, I'm very well. Is it the same for John and Yoko?
Yeah, that's what made me finally stay here. It wasn't a conscious decision. I just found that I was going to movies, going to restaurants, and I have the 5 years. You think, you know, it was just baking bread and the baby? No, because I went to Hong Kong and walked around, and people could not appreciate what it was. When I left England, I still couldn't go on the street. It was still Carnaby Street and all that stuff was going on. We couldn't walk around the block, couldn't go to a restaurant, unless you wanted to go with the business of the star going to the restaurant. Garbage. I've been walking the streets for the last 7 years. When we first moved here, we actually lived in the village, in Greenwich Village, which is a sort of artsy-fartsy section of town, for those who don't know, where all the students and the would-bes live, you know, and a few old poets and that. You know, people that have lived there for years, you know, still live there. But we got into this before, we didn't finish it. She told me, yes, you can walk on the street, you know. She says, you will be able to walk here, but I would be walking around tense like that, waiting for somebody to say something or jump on me and like that. And it took me 2 years to unwind, I can go right out this door now and go in a restaurant. Do you want to know how great that is? Or go to the movies? I mean, people will come up and ask for autograph or say hi, but they won't bug you, you know. They just say, oh, hey, how you doing? Like your record or whatever. You know, that's because we got a record out now. But before they'd shout, how you doing? You know, how's the baby? Oh, great, thanks. How are you?
Talking about restaurants, I'm
I'm
getting
starving
hungry
too.
now.
What happened to the chicken soup?
John and Yoko, on behalf of us, thank you very, very much for
A
talking
pleasure.
to us.
A great pleasure to talk to you and the BBC and all the English and Scots and Welsh and Irish listening. And hello, Mimi. Hello, Julian. How are you doing?
And hello to the English trees.
Yeah, Julian, my son, kindly informed me through Yoko, well, you know, most of my friends are buying it for Kiss, Kiss, Kiss. Well, I don't mind as long as you buy it, kids. If you don't like Paul, you can always buy George. Remember that once? And now you got a choice between John and Yoko.
Cheers.
Hip, hip, toot, toot.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Before we actually depart, we've got your chicken soup. I hope it's not too cold.
Oh,
for you.
it's all right.
But what we would like to do is just one short little piece which we want to put on the air live from the BBC for our programme for Monday morning.
Yes.
It's just a short piece.
You do a
sort of
quick
more as
happy
plugging
Christmas.
your album.
Happy
like,
Christmas,
and
yes, that one.
we'll end with a happy Christmas to our listeners or something like. Do you want to have
Okay.
your soup first?
No, that's all right. So what
John,
do we...
go ahead.
This is a promo for Saturday morning.
Well,
What is
no,
it?
hold on. This is for Monday morning when I'm going to do the programme live from our BBC studios back to London. I would like to say, buck your ears up, Great Britain, because we have a surprise for you.
Oh, and you want us to say what, though?
And I
What
will
c-
say with me,
Oh, okay,
Yoko
okay.
Ono and John Lennon.
Okay.
Wish everybody a happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, great. I forgot it's Christmas. Yeah, go on then.
And we'll be talking to you on the BBC very soon. Are we running?
Let's do it. There's all panic, all hell going on in there.
Are we
I've got
running?
to, just get a special bit of tape for it. They've got to line up
Quick,
tomorrow.
quick.
Hey, you know what they play on
Thank you so
BBC
much,
World
thanks.
Service all the time to
Thank you.
introduce it? The Arches
Marvellous,
music.
marvellous.
Do-do-do-do-do. You want to hear that in Singapore? Boop, 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 boop,
But it must be
Yes,
cold.
yes, yes.
Oh, right. yeah.
It gets me there when I listen in London.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, here's...
Yeah, very quick.
Oh, we can go to a restaurant after.
Oh, sure,
so we
but
don't
let's have a
need-
little slurp.
Yeah.
And you'll say, well, you're going to treat them as live in
Yeah, I think I'm
It's
going to
good
do
enough for a
voice link because
studio.
we've got continuity to think about from London, so I'll do it as a proper intro.
A proper
We'll work it
intro
that
here,
way.
yes.
Yeah,
We'll just play it on the
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the phase of starting over,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And you'll plug that what you've actually been doing.
Yeah.
Imagine they're live
Sure.
in the studio.
Yes, I will do.
Okay. And
Just get the tape on.
Okay, get ready to
These
talk.
people are tired.
I know.
That'll be 15 to tell them about
Yeah,
after
sure.
we've
Right, just
done that
do this
bit.
little bit,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
Just do this. So about a 3 or 4 minute piece it can be, all right? Andy, not more than 4 minutes, okay?
Well, it won't be that long.
Okay. I'll give you fingers up.
You must end with a happy Christmas.
Yeah, sure.
Happy
Yeah.
Christmas. And
Sure.
We'll play the Christmas record, right? So
Oh,
we
yeah.
play it starting all over.
Great.
Okay.
Just got to line the tape up.
So when I go click, we'll go, and so this is Christmas.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much, both of you. It's been terrific.
I love it.
I've
As
thoroughly
you see,
enjoyed it.
you couldn't shut me up. You'll have a lot of editing to do.
It's done in mono, okay?
Okay, mono. You sit like this for mono.
You rolling? Radio 1 coming to you from New York on a Monday morning, and I have quite a surprise for you because apart from the many wonderful things that we've been doing this weekend, sightseeing, which has become almost an obsession, I have had the chance to catch up with somebody who you know and I'm very pleased to be with. Two people, Yoko Ono and John Lennon.
Hello, it is them themselves sitting here in the studio, live from New York. John and Yoko, say something.
Happy Christmas.
And so this is Christmas. And what have you done? Another year over? etc., etc. Nice to be here. Hi.
Very quickly, I can say that you've been kind enough to talk to us, and people back in Britain on Radio 1 are going to be hearing a lot of comment from Yoko and from John in the very near future. You both look very well, and I think I'm right in saying you're both very happy.
We're pretty damn steady, I'd say that. We're in good condition. Thank you very much. It's great to talk to you, and it's not kindness. We want to sell the record, and we want to talk to the English too, right?
It's nice to have you back, and thank you for wishing everybody a happy Christmas.
It's a pleasure. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
And a bra brak mulak nek the new.
Lovely.
I still get that habit of calling it English when I should say British, but too bad.
Yeah.
They call everybody Brits now over here.
It's only one tiny bit extra, but I must just explain it to you. On Radio 1 on Sunday afternoon, we have a programme which is called B15. It comes from a studio called B15.
Yeah.
And what happens is, we don't have producers telling kids what to do. Anybody young can write in and say they want to do a film clip, interview a pop star, do whatever. And we had a piece from a boy of 16. It was most heartwarming because he said, "What's happened to John Lennon?" And he did this piece, and he wrote a letter. Yeah. So we had him in the studio, and he just recorded a piece saying, John Lennon to me is the governor. I was born hearing him, it's fantastic. You know, so the producer then started to sort of start ringing around saying, how can we get hold of John Lennon? So I said, well,
you got him.
We're trying to do it for Radio 1 proper, but for the speech programme, do what you can. So the producer started making phone calls, which all went a bit wrong, so we stopped him doing it. But I wondered if Andy could lead you into it for Adrian. Could you,
real quick?
Andy?
Yeah, is his name Adrian?
The guy who runs the program, who's the DJ.
So you give me the lines. What am I supposed to be talking about?
Do we know the guy's name, the little lad?
No, I don't, I'm afraid.
Doesn't matter.
But really, the thing is, if you, Andy, say, because I'm here with John and Yoko, I'm doing your own bit for Adrian Love, as it were. I have found John and Yoko. Right. They are here with me now, and they are well and happy, aren't you? And John can just say, with Yoko, yes, we are. We've got lots of things happening, and you'll be hearing a great deal more of us in England in the future.
Okay.
Right,
Britain, I'll say Britain.
Britain, yes.
They call them Brits over here now. Hey, we're off. Are we on or are we off? What?
Okay. Now, for the young man who wrote into B15 and wanted to know where John Lennon was, at tremendous expense and with great delight, I am here in New York, and sat in front of me are Yoko Ono and John Lennon. John, this young man is desperate to know how you are. How are you?
I am alive and well, young person, because we don't have your name here, and thanks for thinking about me, and both Yoko and I are alive and kicking, and our child and our music, and you will be hearing a lot of us in the future, if not right at this moment.
And we wish you luck too.
We wish you luck too. And to the Oriental girl that wrote to me from Yorkshire, who's actually English, don't worry about it.
Adrian, what more can I say? We did it for you after all this time.
All you need is Adrian Love.
I don't want to bug you, but just one thing. We're going to put this out as a series. We've got so much marvellous chat. Could you just do some little trail for us, saying John and Yoko, saying that over the next few weeks on Radio 1, you'll be hearing us both telling our story to Andy Peebles.
Okay.
Something like that. Could you do that?
Okay.
Yes, all right.
Shall I start?
You say it and I'll just throw
I'll
a few
go
words
John
in.
And when I say John and you just drop in with Yoko anyway. Okay, this is John Lennon and Yoko Ono talking to you from New York on tape to say over the next few weeks there's going to be a sort of interview series with John and
Yoko, and it's quite exciting.
Quite exciting, talking about our present situation, our past situation, what
and
we've been doing.
And about our lucky face.
Oh, thank God bless you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. You got a lucky face. That's the end of Wheels into Angels. Check that out. God bless you. Listen to it. You'll be amused.
Hope so.
Magic, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Absolute knockout.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. I must call Julie and tell him to listen.
He does it.
Yeah.
Bless you both.
I have learned a hell of a lot this evening.
Oh, God.
That's all right.
And so this is Christmas. What it is, John? Another year over, etc., etc. Nice to be here. Hi. We're pretty damn steady, I think. We're in good condition. Thank you very much. It's great to talk to you. And it's not kindness. We want to sell the record and we want to talk to the English too. It's a pleasure. Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas. And a broke rock and next to
A regular listener, you know that B15 has been broadcasting the progress of the search for an interview with John Lennon. This started when we first heard from a gentleman called Kevin Walsh.
To me, he is one of the best singers that this country has ever produced. He is a master. He produced a great number of albums, really fantastic sounds. He was the best Beatle. He was the leader of the Beatles, and he will go down in history as a master. And he means a hell of a lot to me.
Well, all the details of Kevin's phone call and the many letters we received since were passed to John and Yoko in New York. Most of you will have heard some of the interviews that they had with Andy Peebles. They took time out to send a message to Kevin, although with the rush of going to America, somehow Andy mislaid Kevin's name.
Now, for the young man who wrote into B15, I wanted to know where John Lennon was. At tremendous expense and with great delight, I'm here in New York, and sat in front of me are Yoko Ono and John Lennon. John, this young man is desperate to know how you are. How are you?
I'm well, young person, because we don't have your name here, and thanks for thinking about me, and both Yoko and I are alive and kicking, and our child, and our music, and you will be hearing a lot of us in the future, if not right at this moment.
And we wish you luck too.
We wish you luck too. And to the Oriental girl that wrote to me from Yorkshire, who's actually English, don't worry about it.
Adrian, what more can I say? We did it for you after all this time.
All you need is Adrian love. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.